Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash won the Alola League and Burnet and Kukui adopted him to marry Lillie. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Champion and the Promise. The world had shrunk to a circle of sand and two figures, one cloaked in sunset red, the other in the shadow of the falling night. The roar of the crowd in Manalo Stadium had become a distant, oceanic hum, a sound Ash felt in his bones more than he heard with his ears. Dust, kicked up by claws and lightning-fast pivots, hung in the air like a golden veil, catching the last rays of Alola's setting sun. Across the battlefield, Glad Ion stood as still as the statues on Pony Island, his arms crossed, his face a mask of unreadable intensity. Between them, two Lycanrocs circled, mirror images carved from different times of day. Gladion's midday form was a sleek predator, its movements economical and sharp. Ash's dusk form was a beast of instinct, its shoulders bunched, its orange fur smudged with dirt, and its green eyes narrowed into slits. A thin trickle of blood traced a line from a cut above its right eye, a memento from a previous clash of stone edges. Pikachu, perched on the railing of the trainer's box, was a small, tense ball of yellow fur, his tail twitching with every feint and parry on the field. Pika. Chew, he whispered, a prayer of electricity. Stay sharp, Lycanroc, Ash said, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the thundering in his chest. He's looking for an opening. Don't give him one. Lycanroc growled its assent, digging its claws deeper into the sand. It had been a brutal, beautiful fight. A dance of pure power. Melmetal had fallen to Silvally multi-attack, a clash of titans that had shaken the very foundations of the stadium. Torracat had fought Zoroark to a standstill, a draw born of fire and illusion. Now, it was this. The final match. The one that decided everything. Gladion's gaze flickered, a micro-expression of decision. Lycanroc, Accelerock. The midday Lycanroc exploded forward, a tan blur that left a trench in the sand. It was impossibly fast, a living missile aimed at Ash's partner. There was no time for a complex strategy. There was only trust. Meet it head-on. Accelerock. Ash commanded. His Lycanroc coiled and launched itself forward. The two blurs of rock and fur collided in the center of the arena with a sound like a boulder cracking in two. A shockwave of dust and displaced air erupted from the point of impact, washing over the front rows of the audience. They disengaged, skidding back to their respective sides, both panting, both refusing to yield an inch. He's matching us step for step, Ash murmured, his mind racing. Glad Ion was a phenomenal trainer, precise and ruthless. He didn't make mistakes. You had to force them. He's waiting for us to commit to a big move so he can counter. Gladion's voice cut through the momentary lull. You've grown, Ash. But this is where it ends. Stone Edge. The ground around his Lycanroc erupted. Pillars of glowing blue rock shot up from the sand, jagged and sharp, converging on Ash's Lycanroc. Dodge and weave. Ash yelled. Use your speed. Lycanroc became a phantom. It darted left, a stone spire shattering the space where it had been a second before. It leaped right, another spire grazing its flank. It was a frantic, desperate defense, and Ash knew it couldn't last. Glad Ion was boxing him in, shrinking the battlefield until there was nowhere left to run. Now. Glad Ion commanded, seizing the moment of hesitation. Outrage. His Lycanroc's eyes flared a dangerous crimson. With a guttural roar, it charged through its own field of stone pillars, shattering them with the sheer force of its rage. It was a terrifying, all-or-nothing gambit. Ash saw the opening. A flicker of red in his own Lycanroc's eyes mirrored its opponent's. The Berserker state. He'd seen it before, felt that raw power. But now was not the time for rage. Now was the time for focus. Lycanroc, listen to me. Ash's voice was a whip-crack of command, cutting through the haze of battle. Don't get drawn in. Let it come. His Lycanroc flinched, its instincts screaming to meet fury with fury. But Ash's voice, the voice it trusted above all others, anchored it. It planted its feet, lowering its center of gravity, its own eyes glowing not with wild rage, but with a fierce, controlled fire. Gladion's Lycanroc was on it in a heartbeat, a maelstrom of claws and fangs. It slammed into Ash's partner, driving it back, the sand churning under their feet. Endure it. Ash shouted, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Take it all. The crowd gasped. It looked like a slaughter. Ash was letting his Pokémon get savaged. Up in the stands, Kukui gripped the railing, his knuckles matching Ash's. What is he doing? He muttered. Lillie watched, her heart in her throat, her hand unconsciously squeezing Snowy's fur. He has a plan, she whispered, trying to convince herself as much as her Vulpix. He always has a plan. On the field, Gladion's Lycanroc was relentless, but the outrage was beginning to take its toll. Its movements became a fraction sloppier, its breathing more ragged. And through it all, Ash's Lycanroc held its ground, bruised and battered, but unbroken. Its eyes never left Ash's. Now, Lycanroc. Ash's voice boomed across the stadium. The moment was here. Push it back. With a roar that was pure defiance, Lycanroc surged with power, shoving Gladion's Pokémon away. The enraged Lycanroc stumbled, its mind clouded by the confusion that followed an outrage. It was only for a second, but a second was an eternity. He baited him, Gladion realized aloud, his eyes widening in disbelief. He weathered the storm. It's our turn. Ash declared, a triumphant grin finally breaking through his focused expression. Lycanroc, Stone Edge. This time, the spires of rock were not a cage. They were a weapon. They erupted from the ground in a direct line, a battering ram of stone that slammed into the confused Lycanroc, sending it flying backward. Don't let up. Accelerock. Before Gladion's Pokémon could even hit the ground, Ash's Lycanroc was on it, a streak of dust-colored fur that collided with its opponent in midair. No! Gladion shouted. Lycanroc, counter. It was the right call, the perfect call. His Lycanroc, despite the pain, twisted its body, ready to absorb the hit and return it twofold. It was the move that had won Gladion countless battles. But Ash was one step ahead. It was as if he could see the flow of the battle, feel the energy of his opponent's intent. He had been waiting for this. I knew you'd do that, Gladion. Ash roared. I was counting on it. Lycanroc. Counter the counter. It was an insane command. A move that defied conventional Pokémon battling. You couldn't counter a counter. It was a defensive move, a reaction. But Ash wasn't playing by the book. He was playing with instinct, with a bond that transcended rules. His Lycanroc understood. In the split second before impact, it didn't brace to attack. It opened itself, taking the full, focused energy of Gladion's counter into its own body. For a heart-stopping moment, it was engulfed in a blinding white light. The pain must have been unimaginable. But then, with a guttural scream that was half agony, half triumph, it channeled all of it, the damage from the outrage, the force of its own Accelerock, the immense power of Gladion's counter, and unleashed it in a single, explosive wave of pure force. The resulting blast was not an attack. It was a detonation. The world went white. The oceanic roar of the crowd vanished, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. When vision returned, Gladion's Lycanroc lay unconscious in a shallow crater, swirls in its eyes. Across the field, Ash's Lycanroc stood, swaying on its feet, its body trembling with exhaustion. It was covered in scrapes and bruises, panting heavily, but it was standing. Silence. A profound, absolute silence descended on the tens of thousands of people in Manalo Stadium. The referee, his flag held aloft, seemed to have forgotten how to move. The setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the field. Then, Lycanroc turned its head, looked at Ash, and gave a weak, victorious bark before its legs finally gave out and it collapsed onto the sand in a heap. The silence held for one more beat. Then the referee's arm sliced down. Lycanroc is unable to battle. Which means the victory goes to the challenger. Ash Ketchum. The world exploded. The sound was a physical force, a tidal wave of cheers that slammed into Ash, nearly knocking him over. He stumbled forward, his mind blank, his ears ringing. He saw the referee's mouth moving, saw Kukui leaping over the railing, saw his friends, Kiawe, Malo, Lana, Sophocles, storming the field, but it was all a distant film. I won. The thought was so simple, so monumental, that his brain refused to process it. He had won a league before, in the Orange Islands, but this was different. This was the culmination of a journey, the birth of a new tradition. This was for Alola. He ran. He didn't even think about it. His legs just carried him across the sand, and he slid to his knees beside his fallen partner. Lycanroc, you were incredible. You were more than incredible. Lycanroc managed to lift its head and lick his face, a gesture of pure, exhausted affection. Pikachu was there a second later, launching himself from Ash's shoulder to nuzzle against Lycanroc's cheek. Pika Pikachu. Then strong hands were on his shoulders, hauling him to his feet. It was Professor Kukui, his ever-present lab coat thrown aside, his face beaming with a pride so fierce it was blinding. He wasn't the professor now. He was a mentor, a father figure, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You did it. Ash, you did it. Kukui bellowed, lifting him into a bone-crushing hug. Alola's first champion. You showed them. You showed them all. And then the others were there, a chaotic pile-on of joy. Kiawe clapped him on the back hard enough to make him stumble, a wide, fiery grin on his face. A battle worthy of the Akala fires. You have my respect, champion. Malo and Lana were both crying and laughing, hugging him from either side. Sophocles was trying to look analytical, pushing up his glasses, but the tremor in his voice gave him away. The probability of that final move succeeding was, well, it was astronomical. Congratulations, Ash. Lillie stood just outside the circle of chaos, her hands clasped in front of her, her smile so bright it could have outshone the stadium lights. Her eyes met Ash's over Malo's shoulder, and in that single look, a universe of pride, relief, and shared joy passed between them. No words were needed. Gladion was already there, recalling his Lycanroc with a quiet click. He walked over, his expression no longer masked, but one of clear, hard-won respect. He offered a hand. That final command, it was reckless. It was illogical. It was brilliant. Ash took his hand, their grip firm. You pushed us to it, Gladion. I've never had a battle like that. Nor have I, Gladion admitted, a faint smile touching his lips. The title suits you, Ash. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. From the announcer's booth, a familiar voice, amplified and echoing, called for attention. It was Kukui, having somehow retrieved his masked royal mask and costume in the chaos. He stood on a hastily erected podium in the center of the field, a magnificent, golden trophy shaped like the Alolan sun in his hands. People of Alola, his voice rang out, filled with theatrical flair and genuine emotion. For years, I have dreamed of this day. A day when we could show the world the power, the spirit, and the love that defines our islands. We dreamed of a Pokemon League, and together, we built one. We dreamed of a champion, and today, one has been crowned. He gestured dramatically to Ash. A trainer who embodies the Alolan spirit. Who battles not just with power, but with heart. Who cherishes his Pokémon not as tools, but as family. Alola, I give you your first ever champion. Ash Ketchum. The roar was even louder this time. Confetti cannons erupted, showering the field in a storm of gold and silver. Ash, nudged forward by his friends, walked toward the podium as if in a dream. He felt Pikachu climb back to his customary spot on his shoulder, a warm, grounding weight. Kukui presented the trophy. It was heavy, solid, and cool to the touch. Ash gripped its base, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings of the four tapu. He held it aloft, and the stadium lights caught the polished gold, reflecting a starburst of light across the cheering crowd. He saw them all. His friends, his rivals, the island kahunas watching from their box with proud, solemn nods. He saw Professor Burnet beside Luzman and Wick, her hands clasped to her chest, her face a picture of pure happiness. He saw his Alolan Pokémon, Rowlet, Melmetal, the resting Lycanroc, and Torracat, who was puffing out its chest with pride, all gathered by the edge of the field. This wasn't just a victory. It was a homecoming. The sun had long since bled into the sea, leaving behind a sky of bruised purple and indigo pricked with the first sharp diamonds of stars. The roar of the stadium had been replaced by the gentle shush of waves on the shore and the distant, cheerful music from the celebration party still raging at the convention center. Ash had slipped away. The congratulations, the handshakes, the endless photos, it was amazing, but it was overwhelming. He needed a moment. He needed the sky and the sea, the two constants that had framed his entire Alolan journey. He sat on the cool sand of the beach just behind the stadium complex, the heavy champion's trophy beside him, gleaming softly in the moonlight. Pikachu was curled in his lap, fast asleep, exhausted from a day of intense emotional support. "We did it, buddy," Ash whispered, stroking the little Pokémon's head. "Can you believe it?" A soft crunch of sand announced he was no longer alone. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. He'd recognize that gentle presence anywhere. "I thought I might find you out here," Lillie said, her voice as soft as the sea breeze. She was holding two chilled pineapple juices. "It's a little, much, in there, isn't it?" "Just a little," Ash admitted with a tired grin. He gratefully took the juice she offered. "Thanks, Lillie." She sat down beside him, careful not to disturb Pikachu. She wasn't wearing the formal dress from the ceremony anymore, but a simple white sundress that seemed to glow in the moonlight. For a few moments, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks, watching the moonlight dance on the dark water. "You were amazing today, Ash," she said finally, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "That last battle. I've never seen anything like it. It was like you and Lycanroc were thinking with one mind." Ash looked down at his hands. "I don't know. It just felt right. I knew what Gladion was going to do, and I knew Lycanroc could handle it." He shook his head, still trying to make sense of it. "It's hard to explain." "You don't have to," Lillie said, turning to look at him. Her silver blonde hair was catching the faint light, framing her face like a halo. "I think I understand. It's the same feeling I get with Snowy. A trust that goes deeper than words." He met her gaze, and the easy camaraderie they'd always shared was suddenly charged with something else, something deeper and more profound that had been growing between them for months. It was in the way she'd looked at him after the battle, in the way he'd searched for her face in the crowd. Lillie's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of quiet resolve. "Watching you today, Ash, watching you achieve your dream, it made me realize something." She took a deep breath, her hands tightening around her drink. "I can't wait any longer. I've made up my mind. I'm going to find my father." The declaration hung in the air between them, as solid and real as the trophy at Ash's side. This wasn't the hopeful, hesitant wish she'd expressed before. This was a statement of intent. Ash's weariness vanished, replaced by a surge of supportive energy. He'd known this was her goal, but hearing it said with such certainty made it real. "Lillie, the Ether Foundation has some of his old research notes, coordinates of his last known expedition," she continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "Mother has agreed to unseal them for me. Glad Ion said he'll help me prepare. It will be dangerous, and I don't know where it will lead, but I have to do it. For him, and for me." She looked at him, her eyes wide and full of a vulnerable strength that took his breath away. "I had to grow stronger to be able to even think about this. You, and everyone, you all helped me do that. But this last step. I have to take it." For a moment, Ash thought of his own journey. The constant goodbyes. The endless road. After every league, he moved on. Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, Kalos, he'd always looked forward to the next gym, the next adventure. But the thought of leaving Alola, of leaving this, the family he'd found, the friends he'd made, the girls sitting beside him now, it left an unexpected, hollow ache in his chest. He looked at the trophy. Champion of Alola. It wasn't just a title. It was an anchor. He turned back to Lillie, his expression firm and decided. He reached out, not thinking, and placed his hand over hers. Her skin was cool from the juice bottle. "You're not taking it alone." Lillie's breath hitched. She looked down at his hand. Covering hers, then back up at his face. "Ash, you can't. You're the champion now. You have duties. Responsibilities. My first duty as champion is to protect the people of Alola," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering. "And that includes my friends. That includes you." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll find him, Lillie. I promise." It wasn't a trainer's boast. It was a vow. The moonlight caught the fierce sincerity in his eyes. Lillie's own eyes welled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and relief. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, her fingers curled around his, returning the pressure. "Thank you, Ash," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They sat like that for a long time, hand in hand under the Alolan moon, the promise hanging unspoken in the air between them. A new journey was about to begin, not of gyms and badges, but of family and of a shared future. For the first time in his life, Ash Ketchum wasn't thinking about the next region. He was thinking about right here, right now. He was thinking about home. The smell of malasadas and fresh-grilled Magikarp filled the air, a comforting, familiar scent that instantly made Ash's stomach rumble. The chaotic party at the convention center had finally wound down, and now a smaller, more intimate group was gathered at Professor Kukui's house. It was less a party and more a family dinner. Ash sat at the wooden table, feeling more relaxed than he had all day. Professor Burnet was bustling between the kitchen and the living room, making sure everyone had enough to eat, her face flushed with happiness. Kukui was holding court, regaling a visiting Professor Oak, who had flown in for the final match, with a blow-by-blow analysis of Ash's battle strategies, his voice booming with pride. Ash's mom, Delia, was there too, having arrived with Professor Oak. She sat beside Ash, a gentle, proud smile on her face. Every few minutes, she'd reach over and brush a stray piece of confetti from his hair or fix his collar, her touch a familiar comfort. All of his Alolan Pokémon were out of their Pokeballs, scattered around the open-plan house and the attached lab. Rowlet was, predictably, asleep on the couch, nestled in a pile of cushions. Lycanroc was resting its head on Ash's lap, letting him scratch behind its ears. Torracat was in a standoff with Kukui's Incineroar, though it was less a rivalry and more a mutual, grudging respect. Melmetal, too large for the house, was peering curiously through the large open doorway from the yard, its single red eye blinking slowly. Lillie, Gladion, and Luzaman were there, along with all of their other friends. The house was full, loud, and brimming with a warmth that had nothing to do with the tropical climate. "I have to say, Ash, my boy," Professor Oak said, his eyes twinkling, "that final maneuver was one for the history books. A counter to a counter. It defies all established theory. I'll be writing a paper on it, you know. He just does things like that, Delia said, her voice laced with a mother's fond exasperation. He never does things the easy way. The best way is rarely the easy way, Delia, Kukui boomed. He slapped the table with a grin. That's the Alolan way. All heart, all power. Woo! Professor Burnet laughed, setting a fresh platter of food on the table. All right, honey, calm down before you shake the house down. She looked around at the assembled faces, her smile softening. It's so wonderful to have everyone here. To celebrate this. Ash, we are all so incredibly proud of you. Yeah, you really are something else, Kiawe added, his mouth full of malasada. Ash felt a familiar blush creep up his neck. I couldn't have done it without you guys. Any of you. His gaze drifted across the room, landing on Lillie, who was talking quietly with her mother. She looked up and caught his eye, offering him a small, radiant smile. His heart did a little flip. As the evening wore on and people began to head home, the energy in the house shifted from boisterous celebration to a comfortable, contented quiet. Eventually, it was just Ash, his mom, and the professors. Delia was helping Burnet clear the last of the plates, their conversation a low, happy murmur from the kitchen. Ash was on the verge of nodding off, leaning against the couch with Pikachu snoozing on his chest, when Kukui sat down opposite him. The professor's usual high-energy grin was gone, replaced by a more serious, contemplative expression. Tired, champion? Kukui asked, his voice softer than usual. A little, Ash admitted, rubbing his eyes. It's been a long day. The best day, Kukui said, and the pride was back in his voice. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Ash. Burnet and we've been talking. About a lot of things. About the league, about the future, about you. Ash sat up a little straighter, sensing a shift in the mood. This felt important. Burnet emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Delia followed, but she hung back by the doorway, her expression gentle and knowing. Burnet came and stood behind her husband, placing her hands on his shoulders. The two of them looked like a team, united and a little nervous. Ash, you know how we feel about you, Burnet began, her voice warm but hesitant. From the moment you and Pikachu crashed into our lives, you've brought so much energy, so much joy into this house. Watching you grow, watching you become part of our family, she trailed off, exchanging a look with Kukui. Kukui took a deep breath. What we mean to say, Ash, is that, well, this is your home. We know you have your own mom, and we would never try to replace her. But, you're more than just a student who lives here. You're like a son to us. The words hit Ash with the force of a hyper beam. He stared at them, his mind struggling to catch up. He saw Burnet's hopeful, anxious face, Kukui's earnest, open expression. We know you have your own journeys, Kukui continued, his voice gaining a bit of its usual strength. And we'd never want to hold you back from that. But we want you to know that no matter where you go, you'll always have a place to come back to. A real, permanent place. He swallowed, the next words clearly costing him an effort. So. Burnet and I were wondering, how you would feel, if we, officially adopted you. Adopted. The word echoed in the sudden silence of the room. It was a concept so foreign to Ash's life that it took him a moment to even understand its meaning in this context. His life was the road. His home was wherever he and Pikachu laid their heads. He had his mom in Pallet Town, a place he loved and always returned to, but this was different. This was an offer not of a place to visit, but a place to belong. He saw it all in a flash, the meals at this table, the nights he'd slept on their couch, the way Kukui trained with him, the way Burnet patched up his clothes, the easy, unconditional affection they gave him every single day. They were already his family. This was just giving it a name. He was speechless. 1,000 emotions warred in his chest: shock, confusion, a deep, resonant warmth, and a flicker of panic. What would his mom think? As if on cue, Delia walked forward and sat down beside him, taking his hand. Her touch was warm and steady. "Ash, honey," she said softly, her eyes kind. "The most important thing for any mother is to see her child happy. And I have never, ever seen you happier than you are here in Alola." Ash looked at her, his throat tight. "Mom, you found something special here," she continued, her gaze shifting to Kukui and Burnet with profound gratitude. "A community. Friends who are like siblings. And two people who love you like their own. A trainer's journey can be a lonely one, Ash. But yours doesn't have to be." She squeezed his hand. "Your home is where your heart is. And I think, for a long time now, your heart has been right here." Tears pricked at Ash's eyes. He looked from his mom's loving face to the hopeful, nervous expressions of the two professors who had opened their home and their hearts to him without a second thought. He thought of Lillie's promise, of the journey that lay ahead of them. He thought of his new title, Champion of Alola. He thought of this house, this feeling of belonging. The pieces of his life, which had always been in motion, were suddenly clicking into place, forming a picture he'd never known he was looking for. He needed a moment. He stood up, his legs feeling a little unsteady. Can I just have a minute?" "Of course, Ash," Burnet said immediately, her voice full of understanding. "Take all the time you need." Ash walked out onto the lanai, Pikachu stirring on his shoulder and blinking sleepily. The moon was high in the sky now, a perfect silver disk. He leaned on the railing, taking a deep, shaky breath of the salt-tinged night air. He pulled out his Rotom phone, his fingers fumbling slightly as he found his mom's number. He knew what she'd said, but he had to hear it from her, just the two of them. The phone barely rang once before she picked up. "Ash?" Delia's voice was soft on the other end. She must have stepped into another room. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Did you mean it? What you said?" There was a pause, and he could hear the smile in her voice when she replied. "Of course, I meant it, sweetheart. I've been watching you all week. You're not just a visitor here anymore. You're part of the scenery. You're part of their family. And that makes me so happy." There was a watery quality to her voice now. "My little boy is all grown up. You found your place. That's all I ever wanted for you." A single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, Ash. More than you'll ever know," she said. "Now go back in there and tell them." He ended the call, his heart feeling impossibly full. He looked out at the ocean, at the moonlight on the waves. For the first time, he didn't see a path to a new adventure in a faraway land. He saw a backyard. His backyard. He wiped his eyes, took one last deep breath, and walked back inside. Kukui and Burnet were standing exactly where he'd left them, their anxiety palpable. His mom stood off to the side, giving him his space. Ash walked right up to them. He looked at Professor Kukui, the man who had inspired him and pushed him to be the best. He looked at Professor Burnet, the woman who had cared for him and made this house a home. He didn't need a grand speech. The answer was simple. It was the truest thing in the world. "Yes," he said, his voice clear and certain. For a second, they just stared at him. Then Burnet's face crumpled, and she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. "Oh, Ash." Kukui wrapped his powerful arms around both of them, his laughter a choked, happy sound. "Welcome home, son," he managed to get out. "Welcome home for good." Ash hugged them back, squeezing his eyes shut as Pikachu nuzzled against his cheek. He felt his mom's hand on his back, and in that moment, encircled by love, he was Ash Ketchum, champion of Alola. He was Ash Ketchum, son of Delia, and son of Kukui and Burnet. He was home. Miles away, in the cold, sterile dark of a forgotten laboratory deep within the metallic shell of an abandoned ether paradise branch, the only light came from the cold, blue glow of a single active monitor. The air was frigid, tasting of ozone and antiseptic. A man stood before the screen, a tall, gaunt silhouette in the darkness. His face, illuminated by the data scrolling across the display, was sharp and ascetic, his eyes holding a chillingly calm intelligence. Dr. Kalen had not smiled in years, but the corner of his thin mouth twitched. On the screen, a sensor reading from a remote monitoring station on a deserted atoll hundreds of miles from Alola began to spike. The graph, once a flat line, jagged upward violently. A piercing alarm, low and insistent, began to blare. It was not a sound of warning, but of arrival. In the center of the lab, a point in mid-air shimmered, then warped. The space twisted, folding in on itself not with the brilliant light of a normal ultra-wormhole, but with the light-devouring quality of a black hole. It tore open a small, unstable fissure, no bigger than a man's fist. From the fissure, there was no explosion, no sound. There was only a pulse. A wave of invisible, utter cold washed through the lab. It was not the cold of ice, but the cold of absence. Where it passed, the hardy, genetically modified ferns kept in sterile planters for atmospheric filtering instantly withered, turning black and brittle, their life force not just extinguished, but annihilated. A small cage of Rattata in the corner went silent, their frantic energy gone as if it had never existed. The fissure snapped shut as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the lingering, profound cold and the dead plants. Kalen's gaze was fixed on the monitor, where the energy signature of the event was being analyzed. It was a pattern he had theorized about for decades, a signature of pure negation. He looked at the withered fern, then back at the screen. The twitch in his mouth almost became a smile. He had been right. Luzman, with her sentimental obsession with beauty and life, had been a fool to exile him. She saw only the ultra beasts. He saw what lay beyond them. The perfect, silent order of nothingness. The precursor, he whispered to the empty, lifeless room, his voice a dry rustle of sound. It's beginning. Chapter 2, A Family, Forged. The first thing Ash registered was the smell. Not the salty tang of the sea or the damp scent of dew-kissed grass that had been his alarm clock for most of his life, but something richer. The warm, nutty aroma of brewing coffee, the sweet promise of pancakes on a griddle, and the faint, clean scent of laundry detergent. It was the smell of a home. He blinked his eyes open, the bright Alolan sun already streaming through the window of his new room. It wasn't the loft anymore. After the adoption had become official, a whirlwind of happy, chaotic activity had transformed the spare storage room downstairs. Burnet had declared the loft unsafe for a permanent bedroom. You'll fall down those stairs one day, I just know it, and Kukui had spent an entire weekend clearing it out, assembling a proper bed frame with the same cheerful gusto he applied to demonstrating Z moves. Ash sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The room was still simple, a bed, a desk, a closet, but it was his. His Alola League trophy sat on the desk, its gold catching the morning light. Next to it were a few framed pictures Burnet had insisted on putting up, one of him and his Alolan team, one of all his friends on the steps of the Pokemon school, and a new one from the night of the championship, him, Kukui, and Burnet, arms around each other, grinning like fools. Pikachu was already awake, perched on the windowsill, chattering at a passing Wingull. He scampered over, leaping onto Ash's shoulder with a cheerful, "Pika-Pi." "Morning, buddy," Ash mumbled, still shaking off the last vestiges of sleep. He stretched, his muscles protesting slightly. The past week had been a blur of official ceremonies, press interviews, and what felt like 100,000 handshakes. Being a champion was more tiring than any Pokemon battle he'd ever had. He pulled on a fresh t-shirt and shorts and headed out into the main living area. The scene was one of comfortable domesticity. Professor Kukui was at the table, a datapad in one hand and a forkful of pancake in the other, scrolling through what looked like complex energy readings. Professor Burnet was at the stove, humming to herself as she flipped another pancake onto a towering stack. "Morning, Ash. Sleep well?" Burnet asked without turning around. "Plates are in the second cupboard on the left. Grab a couple, will you?" That simple instruction sent a warmth through Ash's chest that had nothing to do with the sun. He wasn't a guest to be waited on. He knew where the plates were. He grabbed two, setting them on the table before snagging a steaming pancake from the stack. "Morning, Professor, Kukui," Ash said, catching himself. They had insisted he drop the professor title at home, but the habit was hard to break. Kukui looked up from his datapad, his face lighting up. "Ash. Just the man I wanted to see. Take a look at this." He slid the datapad across the table. On the screen was a diagram of a Komo-o, overlaid with a spiraling vortex of energy. "I'm analyzing the Z-power resonance from your battle with its totem. The energy signature is off the charts. If we could figure out how to stabilize that level of output without the totem aura, we could revolutionize Z-move theory. What do you say we do some field tests later? You, me, and Incineroar." "Yeah. Sounds great," Ash said, his mouth full of pancake. Field tests with Kukui meant high-energy training sessions that felt more like battles than research, and that was a language Ash spoke fluently. Burnet set a bottle of syrup on the table with a soft thud. "Before you two run off to blow up a section of the beach, Ash and I have a meeting." Ash and Kukui looked at her, their twin expressions of excitement deflating slightly. "A meeting?" Ash asked. "With who?" "With us," Burnet said, sitting down with her own plate. She fixed Ash with a look that was both kind and no nonsense. "Being a champion isn't just about winning battles, Ash. You're a public figure now. A symbol for all of Alola. That comes with responsibilities." She slid another datapad towards him. This one wasn't filled with exciting energy graphs. It was filled with text. Pages and pages of it. Alolan Regional Pokemon Conservation Act. Inter-Island Trade Agreements. Protocol for Diplomatic Engagements. Ash stared at it, his brain already starting to fog over. "What is all this?" "It's your homework," Burnet said gently. "You don't have to become a lawyer, but you need to understand the basics. When you speak as the champion, your words carry weight. You need to know what you're talking about." Ash groaned, slumping in his chair. "Can't I just appoint someone to handle all this stuff?" "You can, and you will have advisors," Burnet conceded. "But a good leader understands the job. You wouldn't send Pikachu into battle without understanding his moves, would you?" Ash straightened up at the comparison. "Well, no, it's the same thing," she said, her voice softening. "This is just a different kind of battlefield. And I'll help you. We'll go through it together, one piece at a time. I promise it's not as boring as it looks." Her eyes twinkled. "Well, most of it isn't." Kukui grinned, clapping Ash on the shoulder. "See? Teamwork. You handle the political battles with Burnet, and the Pokemon battles with me. Unbeatable." "Woo!" Ash couldn't help but smile. It was strange. Part of him, the part that had been wandering for years, chafed at the idea of schedules and homework. But a bigger part, the part that had finally found a place to drop his pack, felt secure. Grounded. This was what a family did. They prepared you for the world, even the boring parts. "Okay," he said, nodding with new resolve. "Okay. Let's do it." After he finished his pancakes, of course. First things first. The high-tech conference room at Ether Paradise was a world away from the comfortable clutter of Kukui's house. It was all white surfaces, holographic displays, and cool, recycled air. The only window was a vast pane of reinforced glass that looked out into the shimmering blue of the open ocean. Ash sat at the long, sterile table. Between Lillie and a grim-faced Gladion. Across from them, Luzman presided over the meeting, her usual elegant composure underscored by a deep, maternal anxiety. Wick stood beside her, offering quiet support, while Faba hovered near the main holographic projector, looking self-important. The data logs are extensive, Lillie was saying, her fingers flying across the surface of a touchscreen console. A star map materialized in the air above the table, dotted with blinking lights and crisscrossed with faded trajectory lines. Father was incredibly thorough. He logged every jump, every energy reading, every astronomical anomaly. Her voice was steady, professional. This was Lillie in her element, a sharp, analytical mind at work. She had shed the last remnants of the timid girl who had been afraid to touch Pokémon. In her place was a confident young researcher, driven by a singular, powerful purpose. The problem, she continued, zooming in on a dense cluster of data points at the edge of the charted system, is this. His last known coordinates don't correspond to any known star system or stable ultra-space dimension. The trajectory implies he was tracking something, and his energy readings become increasingly erratic the closer he gets to this point. Gladion leaned forward, his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. Erratic how? Lillie manipulated the display. A new window opened, showing a waveform that devolved from a stable, rhythmic pulse into a chaotic, jagged scrawl. These are the ambient energy readings from his ship sensors. It's as if the very laws of physics were starting to fray. The final log entry, just before all communication ceased, contains only a single data packet. She typed a command. A new symbol appeared on the screen. It was a simple shape, a circle, but it was a perfect, terrifying black that seemed to absorb the light of the hologram around it. There's no corresponding energy signature, Lillie murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's a void. An absence of data where there should be something. Luzman flinched, her hand going to her chest. Moan, she whispered, the name a breath of pain. It could be a trap, Gladion said, his voice flat. A corrupted data packet designed to lure people to a dangerous location. We can't just jump to these coordinates blindly. Gladion's right, Luzman agreed, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual authority. It's too reckless. We need more information before we can sanction any expedition. Lillie's face fell, the determined researcher replaced for a moment by a crestfallen daughter. But mother, this is the only lead we have. We can't just, Ash had been quiet, listening, absorbing. He wasn't a scientist. He couldn't read the star charts or analyze the energy waves. But he could read people. He could feel the desperate hope radiating from Lillie, the protective fear from Gladion, the crushing weight of regret from Luzman. And he knew, with the certainty of a well-aimed quick attack, that inaction was not the answer. He placed a hand gently on Lillie's arm. We won't be blind, he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. Everyone turned to look at him. Lillie's the brain, he said, nodding to her with a confident smile. She'll guide us. Gladion's the strategist, he added, looking at his rival. He'll keep us sharp and watch our backs. And I'll handle whatever gets in our way. He leaned forward, his gaze direct and commanding. He wasn't just a kid in a t-shirt anymore. He was the champion, and his presence filled the sterile room with a sudden, undeniable authority. We won't be reckless, he assured Luzman, his tone softening with empathy. But we can't be afraid. Lillie needs to do this. We need to do this. We'll take it one step at a time. We'll use a smaller, faster research vessel, not a full-scale expedition. We'll stay in constant communication. But we have to go. He looked at Lillie, whose eyes were shining with gratitude. He looked at Gladion, whose rigid posture had relaxed almost imperceptibly, a silent admission that Ash's plan was a sound compromise. He looked at Luzman, who stared at him for a long moment, a complex mix of emotions playing across her face. She saw not just the reckless boy who had stormed her stronghold to save her, but the decisive young man who had earned the title of champion. "Very well," Luzman said finally, her voice heavy with concession. "Wick, Faba, begin preparations on the Starlight Runner. Give them access to whatever they need." She looked at her children, then at Ash, her gaze lingering on him. "Bring him home," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a request. It was a plea. "We will," Ash promised. And in the quiet certainty of his voice, everyone in the room believed him. As they left the conference room, Lillie walked beside him, their shoulders brushing. "Thank you, Ash," she said, her voice low. "I was afraid they weren't going to let us go." "I told you we'd do it together," he said simply, giving her a reassuring smile. Her answering smile was a little shaky, but it was real. In that moment, sharing the first concrete step of their monumental journey, the bond between them solidified, forged in a crucible of shared purpose and unwavering trust. The quest was real. And it was theirs. The urgent alert came 3 days later, shattering the peaceful afternoon. Ash and Kukui were in the middle of a frantic training session on the beach, with Pikachu and Incineroar trading blows in a fiery, good-natured brawl. Ash was trying to master the timing of a new combination, an electro ball immediately followed by an iron tail pivot, when his Rotom phone buzzed violently in his pocket. The screen flashed red, displaying the official seal of the Alola Ranger Union. Urgent alert, Class 3 Pokémon Rampage. Sector 7, Melee Island. Champion intervention requested. "What is it?" "Ash?" Kukui asked, jogging over as Incineroar and Pikachu paused their spar. Ash showed him the screen. Kukui's easygoing grin vanished, replaced by a look of serious concern. "Sector 7, that's Hawali outskirts. The Berry Farms." He looked at Ash. "This is your first official call as champion." A jolt of adrenaline, sharper than any training could provide, shot through Ash. This wasn't a league match or a friendly spar. This was real. He nodded, his face set. "Let's go." "Pikachu, on my shoulder." Pikachu leaped into place, his cheeks already sparking with anticipation. "I'll call in a ride," Kukui said, already dialing. Their ride arrived in minutes, a Ranger Union Fiero, fast and efficient. The flight was short and tense, the wind whipping past them. From the air, they could see the problem before they even landed. A plume of smoke rose from one of the larger berry farms. People were running, their figures small and panicked. The Fiero set them down at the edge of the chaos. The scene was worse up close. Fences were torn down, carts were overturned, and a wide swath of berry bushes had been flattened. In the center of the destruction was a Snorlax. It wasn't sleeping. It was roaring, a guttural sound of agony, and slamming its massive fists into the ground, shaking the very earth. Several Ranger Union members were trying to contain it, their Pokémon, a Machamp and an Arcanine, keeping a safe distance, looking hesitant. "What's its status?" Kukui called out to the lead ranger, a woman with a grim expression. "We don't know, Professor," she shouted back over the noise. "It just showed up an hour ago and went berserk. It's not responding to anything. It's not even trying to eat the berries, it's just destroying everything." Ash's eyes narrowed, focusing on the Snorlax. She was right. This wasn't the typical behavior of a hungry Snorlax. This was something else. And then he saw it. The Snorlax's eyes, normally small and placid, were wide with panic. And they were glowing with a faint but sickening violet light. A cold knot formed in Ash's stomach. That color, it was wrong. It felt unnatural. "This isn't just a rampage," Ash said, his voice low. "Something's wrong with it." He stepped forward, past the line of rangers. "Champion, wait. It's not stable," the ranger captain warned. Ash held up a hand, not taking his eyes off the Snorlax. "I see that. Everyone, pull your Pokemon back. Give it space. Don't corner it. His voice held a new, calm authority that made the Rangers hesitate, then comply. He was the champion. This was his call. Ash, be careful, Kukui murmured, his hand hovering near Incineroar's Pokeball. I will, Ash said. Pikachu, you ready? Pika, his partner chirped, cheeks crackling. All right. Let's get its attention. Pikachu, quick attack, but stay on the defensive. Pikachu became a yellow blur, zipping across the ruined field. He didn't charge head-on, but circled the Snorlax, a distracting wasp of motion. The Snorlax bellowed in frustration, swatting at him with its huge hands, but its movements were clumsy, uncoordinated. As Ash got closer, he started to feel it. A sensation that was not quite a sound, not quite a feeling. It was a cold, sharp static in the back of his mind, a psychic scream of pure pain and confusion. It was coming from the Snorlax. The violet glow in its eyes seemed to pulse in time with the sensation. This wasn't anger. It was torment. It's being controlled, Ash realized aloud. Or, infected. Brute force wasn't the answer. Knocking it out would just leave the source of the pain untouched. He had to do something else. He had to make a connection. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Aim for the ground right in front of it. A bolt of brilliant yellow lightning slammed into the dirt, erupting in a shower of earth and sparks. The Snorlax flinched back, momentarily blinded. It was the opening Ash needed. Pikachu, stand by. Ash commanded. Then, too. The shock of everyone watching, he started to walk calmly and deliberately towards the multi-ton behemoth. Ash, what are you doing? Kukui yelled, taking a step forward before stopping himself, trusting Ash's instincts. The Snorlax shook its head, its vision returning. It saw Ash, a small figure walking towards it, and let out another pained roar, raising a fist the size of a boulder. Ash didn't stop. He kept his movements slow, non-threatening. He held his hands out, palms open. Easy, he said, his voice a low, soothing murmur. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help. He could feel the cold static growing stronger, a wall of psychic noise. It felt like pushing through ice water. Underneath it, he could feel the Snorlax's own consciousness, terrified, confused, and hurting. The fist began to lower, the Snorlax's head cocked in confusion. This human wasn't attacking. His voice wasn't a threat. Ash was only a few feet away now. He took one last, deep breath, centering himself. He reached out and placed his hand flat against the Snorlax's massive leg. The moment he made contact, the static in his mind exploded into a full-blown blizzard. The cold was intense, a soul-deep chill that had nothing to do with temperature. It was an energy of pure negation, of emptiness. He saw a flash of that perfect, light-devouring black in his mind's eye. The violet in the Snorlax's eyes flared violently, fighting his presence. Ash gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. He wouldn't be pushed out. He closed his eyes and focused, not on his own strength, but on the bond he shared with his own Pokemon. He thought of Pikachu's unwavering loyalty, Lycanroc's fierce trust, Rowlet's sleepy affection. He gathered all of that warmth, that light, that connection, and pushed it through his hand into the Snorlax. He didn't use his aura as a weapon, like an aura sphere. He used it as a bomb. A wave of pure, golden-white energy flowed from him, a stark contrast to the sickly violet corruption. He wasn't fighting the darkness. He was shining a light on it. He felt the violet energy recoil, like a creature of the dark suddenly exposed to the sun. He felt the Snorlax's own consciousness latch onto his, a drowning swimmer grabbing a lifeline. He pushed more of his own energy, his own calm, his own empathy into the connection. It's okay. You're safe. Let it go. The violet light in the Snorlax's eyes flickered, then dimmed. The cold static in Ash's mind receded, the psychic scream fading to a whisper, then to silence. The Snorlax's massive body shuddered. Its eyes cleared, the panic replaced by a deep, bone-deep weariness. With a soft sigh that sounded impossibly gentle for such a huge creature, its legs buckled, and it sank to the ground, collapsing into a deep, peaceful sleep. Ash stumbled back, his legs trembling, a wave of dizziness washing over him. The effort had drained him more than any physical battle ever had. He was pale and breathing heavily, a cold sweat chilling his skin despite the tropical heat. Kukui was at his side in an instant, a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Ash. Are you alright?" "I'm okay," Ash panted, leaning on him for support. He looked at the sleeping Snorlax, now just a peaceful, mountain-sized Pokémon, not a monster. "It's gone. The thing that was inside it." He looked at Kukui, his eyes wide with a deep, unsettling fear. "It wasn't an attack, Kukui. It felt like an infection. Like something cold and empty was trying to eat its mind." Kukui's expression was grim. He had seen the violet glow. He had seen the effect it had on Ash. This was something new. Something dangerous. The first official act of Alola's champion wasn't stopping a simple rampage. It was an exorcism. The mood back at Ether Paradise was heavy. Ash, now recovered but still subdued, sat with Lillie, Gladion, and Luzman in the same stark conference room. He had just finished describing the encounter, focusing not on his own actions, but on the sensation he'd felt from the Snorlax. "And the cold," he finished, rubbing his arms as if trying to ward off a chill. "It was the worst part. It felt like nothing. Like the feeling you get when a battle is over, but instead of being tired, your Pokémon is just gone. That emptiness. It felt like that." He looked up at them, his gaze pleading for them to understand. "And the symbol, the black circle Lillie found in the data logs. When I closed my eyes and pushed back against that energy, I saw it. Just for a second." A heavy silence fell over the room. Gladion was pacing, his usual stoicism replaced by a restless, predatory energy. Luzman was pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. But Lillie was still, her eyes distant, her brow furrowed. She wasn't looking at Ash. She was staring at her mother. The description, the cold, the emptiness, the infection of the mind, had triggered something, a half-forgotten memory from a time she desperately wanted to forget. A time when her mother was not herself, when she was under the influence of Nihilego. But this was different. The neurotoxin had caused obsession, a twisted love. What Ash described was the opposite, a void. A perversion of science, Lillie whispered, the words coming to her unbidden. Luzman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock and a flicker of fear. "What did you say?" "It was something I read," Lillie said, her voice gaining strength as the memory solidified. "A long time ago. I was snooping in your private office. I found some old research proposals you had rejected. They were in a sealed file marked Extreme Biohazard. I only skimmed it, but it talked about things like this." She stood up, her gaze locked on her mother's. It talked about a dimension of absolute nothingness. An energy that didn't create, but erased. It called it paradimensional void energy. Luzman's face was a mask of dawning horror. She knew exactly what Lillie was talking about. It was a dark chapter of the Ether Foundation's history she had tried to bury forever. "Mother," Lillie pressed, her voice unwavering. "I need to see those files. Now." "Lillie, no," Luzman said, her voice shaking slightly. "That research is dangerous. It's forbidden for a reason. It is monstrous. The thing that infected that Snorlax was monstrous." Gladion cut in, his voice sharp as broken glass. "If those files can tell us what we're dealing with, we need to see them." Luzman looked from her son's fierce gaze to her daughter's implacable resolve. She saw the same fire in them that had once burned in her, the relentless pursuit of knowledge. But their fire was tempered by a compassion she had, for a time, lost. She took a shuddering breath and gave a single, sharp nod. Faba. Unlock my private archives. Security clearance Omega. Faba, who had been listening with growing alarm, paled. President Luzaman, are you certain? That level of clearance, do it, she commanded, her voice steel. Minutes later, they were in Luzaman's private office, a place far more personal than the conference room. A holographic display hummed to life, projecting a file locked with a dozen layers of security. After Faba entered the final code, the file opened. It was a series of research proposals, authored by a scientist they had never heard of. Authored by Dr. Kalin. His proposals were chillingly articulate. He theorized the existence of a dimension antithetical to their own, a place not of matter and energy, but of absence and negation. He called this void the umbra, and the parasitic, semi-sentient force that was its prime inhabitant, the animus. The umbra animus, Lillie read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. It represents a state of perfect order. No conflict, no chaotic emotion, no flawed free will. Only the peace of absolute silence. By harnessing its void energy, we can purge the world of the disease of consciousness and bring about a final, lasting tranquility. Below the main proposal were Luzaman's own notes, written years ago. Her handwriting was sharp, angry. This is not science, it is nihilistic fantasy. Kalin's obsession is a threat to all life. He sees emotion and thought not as a gift, but as a flaw to be corrected. His methods are unethical, his goal monstrous. All research terminated immediately. Dr. Kalin is to be exiled from the Ether Foundation and all its affiliates, his research sealed indefinitely. There it was. A name. A motive. The abstract threat now had a face, a twisted ideology. Dr. Kalin. Ash stared at the name, a cold, hard anger solidifying in his gut. This wasn't a confused ultra beast or a simple villain. This was someone who looked at the love he felt for his Pokémon, the joy of a hard-won battle, the warmth of his new family, and saw a disease to be cured. So this is what we're up against, Glad Ion said, his voice a low growl. A madman who wants to turn the world into a vacuum. Lillie deactivated the hologram, the chilling text vanishing from the air. She looked at Ash, her fear now mingled with a steely resolve that mirrored his own. He was tracking something, she said, connecting the pieces. My father. He wasn't just lost. He must have discovered Kalin's work, or the Umbra itself. He was trying to stop it. The personal quest to find her father and the looming threat of a world-ending plot had just merged into a single, terrifying path. A path that began at a set of coordinates in a place that shouldn't exist, marked only by a circle of perfect, devouring black. Chapter 3, The Crown of Thorns. The suit was a prison of starched fabric and tailored lines. Ash tugged at the collar of the crisp white shirt, the knot of the dark silver tie feeling like a slowly tightening noose. The jacket, a deep charcoal gray that Burnet had insisted was dignified, felt stiff and unnatural on his shoulders, a far cry from the comfortable freedom of his usual attire. He felt less like a champion and more like he was in costume, and a deeply uncomfortable one at that. Hold still, Ash, Lillie said, her voice a mix of amusement and concentration. She stood before him, carefully adjusting the fold of his pocket square, a small, elegant splash of lilac that matched her own gown. You look very handsome, you know. I feel like a Meowth in a Fennekin costume, he grumbled, though he stood still for her. It's tight. And itchy. Lillie laughed, a soft, musical sound that made the stuffy room they were in feel a little brighter. It's just for one night. Think of it as a strategic disguise. They were in a private suite at the Ether Foundation's main gala hall on Ether Paradise. Below them, the grand ballroom was already filling up with a glittering assembly of Alola's most influential people, politicians, business magnates, researchers, and even a few international dignitaries from other Pokémon League committees who had extended their stay after the championship. The event, orchestrated by Luzmin, was officially a fundraiser for Ultra Beast habitat restoration, but its true purpose was a show of strength and stability. It was meant to wash away the lingering stain of the Nihilego incident and present a new, United Ether Foundation to the world. And Ash, as Alola's first champion, was the guest of honor, the living symbol of that new era. Lillie stepped back, her head tilted as she surveyed her work. There. Perfect. She herself was a vision. She wore a floor-length gown of pale lilac silk that shimmered under the lights, her silver blonde hair swept up in an elegant style that left a few delicate strands to frame her face. The shy, hesitant girl was gone, replaced by a poised and graceful young woman who looked every bit her mother's daughter. But her eyes, as they met Ash's, held the same warmth and genuine kindness he had always known. "Are you ready?" she asked, her smile gentle. "Not even a little bit," he admitted with a sigh. "All those people, they're all going to be staring. Asking questions about, I don't know, economic policy or something." "Burnet's lessons will pay off," she reassured him, giving his arm a light squeeze. "And I'll be right there with you. We'll face the stuffy suits together." He gave her a grateful smile. The thought of navigating this sea of formalities was daunting, but having Lillie by his side made it feel manageable. Like they were a team, even here. He looked at their reflections in the mirror behind her. Him, looking awkward and out of place in his suit, her, looking like she was born for this. And yet, together, they somehow made sense. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath and rolling his shoulders, trying to settle into the unfamiliar clothes. "Let's get this over with." As they descended the grand staircase into the ballroom, a wave of polite applause rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned to them. Camera flashes sparkled like a swarm of Joltik. Ash felt 100 different sets of eyes on him, analyzing, judging. He forced a smile, his hand instinctively going to his belt where his pokeballs should have been. They were in a secure locker for the evening, a gala rule that left him feeling innately vulnerable. Only Pikachu, who had been granted a special exemption as the champion's distinguished partner, was present, perched on a velvet cushion at Luzmin's main table, looking deeply unimpressed by the whole affair as he nibbled on a specially made Pokémon-friendly canopy. The first hour was a blur of polite introductions and excruciating small talk. Ash shook hands until his arm ached, smiled until his face felt stiff. He was introduced to council members from Melee, landowners from Akala, and tech moguls from Hawali City. He tried to remember the key points Burnet had drilled into him, mentioned the importance of sustainable berry farming, praised the new ferry line to Pony Island, nodded thoughtfully when they talked about zoning laws. Lillie was a godsend. She moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, gently steering conversations away from topics Ash knew nothing about and expertly highlighting his strengths. When a reporter asked a pointed question about his plans for a regional defense force, Lillie smoothly interjected, "The champion believes that Alola's greatest defense is its unity and the strong bonds between its people and their Pokémon, a philosophy he demonstrated beautifully in the league." The reporter scribbled it down, satisfied. Ash just nodded, looking as champion-like as he could. He was beginning to think they might actually survive the evening when a new figure approached them. The man was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that made Ash's feel like a rental. He had silver hair at his temples and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Wick, who was making the introductions, looked unusually tense. "Champion Ketchum, Miss Lillie," Wick said, her voice strained. "May I present Mr. Saxon, a senior board member of the Kanto Pokémon League." "A pleasure to finally meet the prodigy of the islands," Saxon said, his voice smooth and condescending. He shook Ash's hand, his grip firm but brief, a clear dismissal. His gaze swept over Ash's suit, a faint sneer playing on his lips. "A remarkable achievement, winning your local tournament." "Truly." The emphasis on local was like a needle. Ash felt his back straighten. "The Alola League was more than a tournament," Ash replied, his voice level. He remembered Kukui's passionate speeches, the way the entire region had come together. It was a celebration of our home. Saxon chuckled, a dry, patronizing sound. Of course, of course. A charming sentiment. But you must understand, from an international perspective, a fledgling league carries little weight. There are standards. Traditions. The Indigo League, for instance, has a legacy spanning decades. Our champions are tested against the most elite trainers in the world. He waved a dismissive hand. This was a wonderful festival. But a true test of a champion? That remains to be seen. The insult was not just to Ash. It was to Kukui, to the Kahunas, to Gladion, to everyone who had poured their heart and soul into building the league. A hot flush of anger rose in Ash's chest, but before he could say something he might regret, a familiar, booming voice cut in. Are you saying Alola's champion isn't good enough, Mr. Saxon? Professor Kukui strode towards them, a plate of appetizers in one hand, but his usual cheerful grin was gone, replaced by a look of cold fire. He wasn't wearing his lab coat, but a formal version of his usual attire that still managed to look casual and powerful. Saxon turned, his smooth facade faltering for a split second at Kukui's direct confrontation. Professor Kukui. I was merely pointing out the difference in scale and prestige. Were you? Kukui said, his voice dangerously low. Because it sounded to me like you were insulting my region and my champion. He set his plate down on a passing waiter's tray with a sharp clink. Here in Alola, we have a tradition too. When someone's honor is challenged, they settle it. Not with words, but with action. A hush had fallen over their corner of the ballroom. People were turning to watch, sensing the shift in atmosphere from polite celebration to tense confrontation. Kukui looked at Ash, a fierce, challenging glint in his eyes. The Ether Foundation was kind enough to set up an exhibition court in the West Wing. For a bit of evening entertainment. His gaze shifted back to Saxon, sharp as a razor. Unless, of course, the esteemed Kanto League board is afraid of a little local tournament, challenger. It was a masterful trap. Saxon was cornered. To refuse would be to admit cowardice, to validate Kukui's challenge in front of a crowd of influential people. His face tightened, a flicker of genuine anger showing through his polished veneer. He saw himself as a kingmaker, a figure of authority. Being challenged by this upstart professor and his unrefined champion was an affront. I am not a field trainer, Professor, Saxon said stiffly. I'm sure you have a Pokémon with you for personal protection, Kukui countered smoothly. Just a simple one-on-one battle. A demonstration. To show our international guests the flavor of Alolan battling. Saxon was trapped. He gave a curt, angry nod. Fine. A demonstration. I will show your champion what a truly well-bred and disciplined Pokémon looks like. He turned and strode towards the West Wing without another word, his entourage scrambling to follow. Kukui turned to Ash, the fire in his eyes now one of pride and encouragement. He insulted our home, Ash. He insulted you. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about honor. Show him what an Alolan champion is made of. Show him your power. Ash looked at Kukui, then at Lillie, who gave him a small, determined nod. All the awkwardness, the feeling of being an imposter in a suit, it all burned away, replaced by the familiar, clarifying fire of battle. This was a language he understood. This was a test he was born to take. I will, Ash said, his voice resonating with a newfound confidence. The crown of thorns was gone. The mantle of the champion settled comfortably on his shoulders. The exhibition court was a sleek, modern arena, smaller than the stadium but no less impressive. A low-energy shield separated the polished floor from the spectators, who now crowded the viewing gallery, their polite chatter replaced by a buzz of excited anticipation. What was supposed to be a boring gala had just turned into the season's most unexpected event. Ash stood on one side of the court, his borrowed jacket now discarded, his sleeves rolled up. He felt the familiar thrill, the electric hum of an impending battle. On the other side, Saxon stood stiffly, his face a mask of cold fury. He clearly felt this was beneath him, a fact that only fueled Ash's determination. This will be a one-on-one battle between our honored guest, Mr. Saxon of the Kanto League, and the Alolan champion, Ash Ketchum. Faba announced, clearly relishing his role as impromptu referee. The battle will be over when one Pokémon is unable to continue. Let the battle begin. Saxon sneered, enlarging a luxury Pokeball with a flick of his wrist. Allow me to provide a lesson in true power. Go, Rhyperior. The Pokémon that materialized was a monster. A behemoth of rock and armor, its horn drill spinning with latent power. It was easily a foot taller than a standard Rhyperior, its muscles thick and corded. It was a Pokémon bred for power, a living siege engine. A murmur of appreciation went through the Kanto delegation in the crowd. Ash didn't flinch. He looked over at the main table, where Pikachu was now standing on the velvet cushion, his tail ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on Ash, waiting for the call. Their gazes met across the room. There was no other choice. It had to be him. Pikachu, I choose you. Ash yelled. A wave of surprised muttering rippled through the crowd. Saxon actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. A Pikachu? You're pitting a mouse against a mountain. Is this a joke? Pikachu didn't wait for a formal entrance. He leaped from the table, a yellow streak of lightning, and landed on the court in front of Ash, his cheeks sparking furiously. The size difference was almost comical. Pikachu barely came up to Rhyperior's ankle. Don't underestimate us, Ash said, his voice dangerously calm. We've taken down bigger. Saxon's amusement turned to irritation. Then this will be a short lesson. Rhyperior, Rock Wrecker. Rhyperior roared, pulling its arm back. It ripped a huge chunk of the polished floor out of the ground, compressed it into a glowing sphere of raw kinetic energy, and hurled it at Pikachu. It was a devastating attack, fast and overwhelmingly powerful. Pikachu, quick attack. Let's move. Ash commanded. Pikachu was already a blur. He darted left, the massive rock wrecker projectile screaming past where he'd been, slamming into the energy shield with a deafening boom that made the entire room shake. The shield flared violently but held. He's fast, I'll grant you that, Saxon said grudgingly. But he can't run forever. Rhyperior, use Horn Drill. The massive Pokémon charged, its horn spinning into a deadly, shimmering point. It was a one-hit KO move. Saxon wasn't playing around, he wanted to end this quickly and humiliatingly. He's too big and slow. Ash countered. Pikachu, get under him. Pikachu didn't hesitate. He zipped forward, right towards the charging behemoth. At the last possible second, he slid, sand surfing on the polished floor, and shot directly between Rhyperior's legs. The horn drill hit nothing but air. Now, Iron Tail on its knee joint. While still under the massive Pokémon, Pikachu flipped, his tail glowing with a hard, metallic sheen. He whipped it around and slammed it into the back of Rhyperior's right knee. It wasn't a move designed to do massive damage, but to destabilize. Rhyperior bellowed in surprise and pain, its knee buckling. Its charge faltered, and it stumbled, its immense weight making it clumsy. Don't let up. Again, on the other one. Pikachu was already moving, a yellow phantom under the giant. He repeated the move on the other leg. Rhyperior roared in frustration, trying to turn, to swat at the tiny pest under it, but it was like a man trying to swat a fly in a dark room. This is your strategy? Saxon mocked, though a line of sweat had appeared on his temple. Annoying it to death. It's called tactics, Ash shot back. Something you don't seem to appreciate. Pikachu, get some distance. Electroweb. Pikachu shot out from under the Rhyperior, landing gracefully a dozen feet away. He leaped into the air, spinning, and launched a net of crackling electricity. The web wasn't aimed at Rhyperior's body, but at its feet. It landed, sticky and charged, tangling the giant's legs. Rhyperior struggled, but the electrically charged net only seemed to tighten, sending painful jolts up its legs. It was effectively immobilized. In the stands, Lillie watched, her hands clasped to her chest, her heart pounding. She saw the other trainers watching, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grudging admiration. Ash wasn't just overpowering his opponent. He was dismantling him, piece by piece, with speed, precision, and a strategy that turned his Pokémon's small size into its greatest asset. "You see," Kukui said to a stunned-looking board member beside him, his voice a low, proud rumble. "That's our champion. All brain, all heart." Saxon's face was now flushed with rage. His prized Pokémon, a creature of immense power, was being humiliated by a common Pikachu. Enough of this. Rhyperior, use Earthquake. Destroy the entire court if you have to. Bad move, Ash said with a grim smile. Rhyperior roared and lifted its foot, slamming it down with cataclysmic force. The entire floor of the arena cracked and buckled, sending a shockwave of energy outward. But Ash was ready. "Pikachu, use the shockwave. Jump." Just as the earthquake hit, Pikachu used his iron tail to slam the ground, launching himself high into the air, riding the upward force of the tremor. He sailed over the wave of destruction, completely unharmed, landing lightly on the other side of the court. Rhyperior, however, had not only failed to hit its target, but it had also shattered the electroweb and the very floor beneath its feet, leaving it standing in a pit of its own making, its footing unstable. "He's off balance," Ash said, his voice ringing with finality. "It's over. Pikachu, let's show him our full power. 10 million volt thunderbolt." Ash thrust his arm forward, his Zering flaring to life. He struck the familiar pose, a dance of perfect synchronicity with his partner. A rainbow of energy flowed from the Z-crystal, enveloping Ash. Before surging across the battlefield and into Pikachu. Pikachu's body became a conduit for unimaginable power. The air crackled, the lights in the ballroom flickered, and a storm of multicolored electricity gathered around him, his fur standing on end, his eyes blazing with Z-power. Pika. Choo. He didn't just launch a lightning bolt. He unleashed a torrent. A massive, roaring river of rainbow-colored electricity slammed into the trapped Rhyperior. It was not just an attack, it was an overwhelming force of nature. Rhyperior had no time to defend, no time to even roar. It was engulfed, its massive form silhouetted for a moment against the blinding light before it collapsed, crashing to the ruined floor with a ground-shaking thud. Unconscious. The light faded. The roar of electricity subsided, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Pikachu landed softly, panting, a few stray sparks dancing harmlessly in his fur. The Rhyperior lay motionless, swirls in its eyes. For a moment, no one moved. The entire ballroom was stunned into absolute silence. They had just witnessed not just a victory, but a statement. A swift, strategic, and overwhelmingly dominant display of power that left no room for argument. Faba, his jaw hanging open, finally remembered his duty. Rhyperior is unable to battle. The winner is Champion Ash Ketchum. The silence broke. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. The Alolan contingent, Kukui, Kiawe, Lana, all of them, erupted in cheers. Even the neutral parties were clapping, their faces showing a mixture of shock and profound respect. The Kanto delegation looked ashen-faced. Saxon stared at his fallen Pokémon, then at Ash and his Pikachu, his face a mixture of disbelief and utter humiliation. Without a word, he recalled his Rhyperior, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the ballroom, his authority shattered. Ash walked to the center of the court, his heart still pounding. Pikachu ran to him and leaped into his arms. "You were amazing, buddy," Ash whispered, hugging him tight. He had done it. He had defended Alola's honor. He had proven himself. He stood tall, the awkwardness of the suit forgotten, feeling every inch the champion. Later, as the gala slowly returned to its celebratory rhythm, now with a much more genuine and respectful energy, the orchestra began to play a slow, melodic piece. Ash found himself standing near the terrace, the cool night air a welcome relief. That was breathtaking, Ash. He turned to see Lillie standing there, her eyes shining with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "He shouldn't have insulted our home," Ash said with a shrug, though a proud grin touched his lips. "No, he shouldn't have," she agreed. She glanced towards the dance floor, where a few couples were now swaying to the music. She looked back at him, a hint of shyness in her expression. I never learned to do this properly. Mother tried to teach me, but I always had 2 left feet." Ash felt his own nervousness return, but it was a different kind now. A pleasant, fluttering kind. "Me too," he admitted. "I think I stepped on Serena's feet about a dozen times in Kalos." Lillie's smile widened. "Well, perhaps 2 people with 2 left feet could cancel each other out." She tentatively held out a hand. "May I have this dance, Mr. Champion?" His heart did a flip. He looked at her outstretched hand, then into her hopeful eyes. He felt a magnetic pull, a connection that had nothing to do with Pokémon or battles. Slowly, he took her hand. It was soft and warm in his. "I'll try not to step on your feet," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "I'll try not to step on yours," she replied. He led her onto the edge of the dance floor, away from the more experienced dancers. He awkwardly placed one hand on her waist, and she rested her hand on his shoulder. They started to move, their steps clumsy and hesitant at first. They were both stiff, overly conscious of the music and each other. "See?" Ash mumbled with a nervous laugh. 2 left feet. "We just need to find a rhythm," Lillie whispered. She leaned in a little closer, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. Her hair smelled of starlight and moonlace flowers. Something shifted then. Ash stopped thinking about the steps and just focused on the feeling of Lillie in his arms, the soft melody of the music, the quiet rhythm of their breathing. He found himself moving more naturally, swaying with her, their clumsy steps smoothing into a gentle, easy glide. It wasn't a performance. It was a quiet conversation, spoken without words. They were in their own world, the noise and glitter of the gala fading into a soft focus background. The weight of his new title, the pressure of the coming journey, it all melted away. There was only this. This quiet moment of intimacy, of 2 people finding their rhythm together, their hearts beating in time with the music. The feelings that had been simmering just beneath the surface, friendship, trust, admiration, were now blossoming into something warmer, something more profound. It was a feeling of rightness, of coming home, not to a place, but to a person. As the song came to a gentle end, they slowed to a stop, but they didn't pull away. Ash looked down at her, and she looked up at him. The space between them was charged with unspoken words, with the promise of a future that was theirs to build. In the middle of a crowded ballroom, they had found a moment of perfect, quiet solitude. The intimate moment was shattered by a frantic energy. Gladion's type, Null, now a magnificent Silvally, was not a creature prone to panic. It was stoic, powerful, and utterly controlled. So when it suddenly materialized at the edge of the terrace, its composite eyes wide with alarm and a low growl rumbling in its chest, Gladion was by its side in an instant. "What is it, Silvally?" Gladion asked, his hand resting on its neck, feeling the tension in its muscles. Silvally ignored him. Its gaze was locked on something past the terrace, towards the restricted northern wing of the ether facility. It let out a sharp, guttural cry, a clear sound of warning. Ash and Lillie broke apart, the spell broken. Ash's battle instincts flared back to life. What's wrong? I don't know, Gladion said, his eyes narrowed. It senses something. A threat. Silvally took a step forward, then another, its movements deliberate, predatory. It was leading them. Without a word, the three of them, Ash, Lillie, and Gladion, abandoned the gala. They moved as one, slipping through a side door and into the sterile white corridor of the main facility, following the agitated Pokémon. The stark fluorescent lights and quiet hum of machinery were a jarring contrast to the warm glow of the party. The North Wing is just long-term research storage and a few secondary labs, Lillie whispered, her knowledge of the facility's layout coming to the fore. No one should be in there tonight. Silvally led them down a series of corridors, its claws clicking softly on the polished floor. It stopped before a heavy door marked Ultra Wormhole Energy Containment, Level 5 access only. The door was sealed, but Silvally growled at it, pawing at the seam. Gladion placed his hand on the biometric scanner. A red light flashed. Access denied. It's locked me out, Gladion said, his voice tight with suspicion. Faba and Mother are the only ones with a higher clearance. Ash didn't waste time with scanners. He looked at the heavy magnetic lock. Pikachu, he said, nodding to his partner who had followed them from the ballroom. A little shock. Right on the control panel. Pika. Pikachu leaped onto the panel, and with a small, controlled burst of electricity, shorted the locking mechanism. The door hissed open with a pneumatic sigh. The room inside was dark, save for the pulsating blue-white glow of a large containment field in the center. Inside the field, a tiny, unstable wormhole, no bigger than a fist, writhed and twisted. Floating next to it was a lone figure in an Ether Foundation lab coat, their back to the door. They were holding a device, a cylindrical vacuum canister, connected by a tube to the containment field's energy siphon. They were stealing the raw, chaotic energy of the wormhole. Hey! Ash shouted. The figure flinched, spinning around. It was a low-level Ether employee, a young man Ash vaguely recognized from the conservation area. His face was pale with terror, his eyes wide and fanatic. You're not supposed to be here, the saboteur stammered, fumbling with the canister. Neither are you, Gladion growled, stepping into the room. Silvally moved with him, a low snarl exposing its teeth. What are you doing? You wouldn't understand, the employee cried, his voice cracking. He disconnected the canister, which now glowed with a faint, captured light. This is for a greater purpose. For the purification. For the coming silence. The words were an echo of Kalen's manifesto. Ash's blood ran cold. You're one of his. The saboteur's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. He fumbled at his belt, pulling out a pokeball. Don't try to stop me. Mook, sludge wave. A grotesque Alolan mook erupted from the ball, its multicolored body immediately melting into a foul-smelling tidal wave of toxic sludge that surged towards them, aiming to block the doorway. Lillie, get back! Ash yelled, pushing her behind him. Gladion was already moving. Silvally, air slash. Silvally roared, its head crest glowing. It swung its head, unleashing a blade of pure wind that sliced through the sludge wave, parting it like the sea and splattering the toxic liquid against the walls, where it sizzled and smoked. The saboteur used the moment of distraction to bolt, sprinting for an emergency exit on the far side of the lab. He's getting away. Ash yelled. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Pikachu launched a bolt of lightning, but the saboteur was ready. His mook, surprisingly fast, leaped in front of him, absorbing the full force of the attack with its thick, insulated body. It barely flinched. The saboteur fumbled with a keycard and swiped it at the emergency door, which slid open onto a dark, exterior platform. We're not letting you take that. Ash shouted, dashing after him. Gladion was right on his heels. They burst onto the platform just in time to see the saboteur leap onto the back of a waiting Noivern that had been clinging to the side of the structure. The canister was clutched tightly in his hand. As the Noivern's powerful wings beat the air, kicking up a gust of wind, the saboteur turned back to them, a crazed, triumphant look on his face. "You're too late. The doctor's vision is at hand," he shrieked over the wind. "Soon, all the noise will end. The great silence is coming for you all." The Noivern let out a deafening screech and launched itself into the night sky, vanishing into the darkness before Ash or Gladion could even command an attack. They were gone. Ash slammed his fist on the railing in frustration, the metal vibrating from the impact. He got away. With a sample of pure wormhole energy, Gladion finished, his voice grim. He stared out into the empty sky where the Noivern had disappeared. He said, "The doctor. He has followers, inside the Foundation. Spies." The implications were chilling. Kalen wasn't just a lone madman in a remote lab. He had a network. He had resources. And now, he had a new source of power. The gala, the victory, the dance, it all seemed a lifetime ago. The threat wasn't abstract anymore. It was here, under their noses, and it was escalating. Lillie came out onto the platform, her beautiful gown now seeming terribly out of place against the backdrop of industrial metal and open ocean. She looked from Ash's frustrated face to her brother's grim expression. The fear was in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by a familiar, steely resolve. Their personal quest and the fight for the world were now inextricably linked. Kalen was a threat to everything they held dear, and Moan's last known coordinates were the only clue that connected him to this growing darkness. The first light of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of soft rose and pale orange. The sounds of the party had long since faded, replaced by the cry of wind gull and the gentle lapping of the waves against the ether paradise docks. The air was cool and smelled of salt and new beginnings. Ash and Lillie stood on the deck of the Starlight Runner, a sleek, compact research vessel designed for speed and long-range exploration. They had worked through the night with Luzman and Gladion, the failed capture of the saboteur lending a new, frantic urgency to their preparations. There was no more time to waste. Ash had changed back into his familiar clothes, the comfortable blue jacket a welcome armor after the prison of the suit. Pikachu was on his shoulder, his ears twitching, alert to the new surroundings. Lillie, dressed in a practical explorer's outfit, stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Snowy, her Alolan Vulpix, was at her feet, a small, white beacon of calm. Gladion and Luzman stood on the pier below them. The animosity between Gladion and his mother had softened, replaced by the gravity of their shared purpose. "The ship's systems are fully automated, but I've uploaded all of Father's data," Lillie said, her voice quiet but firm. "The coordinates are locked in. We're ready." Luzman looked up at her daughter, her face a portrait of maternal love and fear. "Be careful, Lillie. Both of you." Her gaze shifted to Ash, her expression full of trust. The trust he had earned in a dance of fire and lightning, and in the quiet resolve of his promises. "I am entrusting you with my greatest treasures." Gladion just gave a sharp nod, a silent communication that passed between rivals and now, allies. "Keep her safe." Ash returned the nod. "Always. We will." "Luzman," Ash said, his voice full of a conviction that left no room for doubt. "We'll find him. And we'll figure out what this Kalen is planning." He looked at Lillie, who met his gaze, her own determination a mirror of his. The night's events, from the heights of the ballroom to the dark discovery in the lab, had forged a new clarity between them. They were partners in this, in every sense of the word. "Let's go," Lillie said, her hand resting on the ship's console. With a low hum, the Starlight Runner's engines engaged. It detached from its moorings and began to glide silently out of the harbor, picking up speed as it met the open water. Ash and Lillie stood together at the railing, watching as Ether Paradise, and the whole of Alola, grew smaller behind them. They were sailing towards the unknown, towards a point on the map marked only by a terrifying, empty black circle. Their quest had officially begun. Chapter 4, Whispers in the Ice. The world had bled of all color. For days, the view from the Starlight Runner's cockpit had been the infinite, stardusted black of deep space, punctuated by the surreal, kaleidoscopic light of ultra-wormhole transit. Now, it was an endless, featureless expanse of white. White sea, choked with massive, fractured plates of ice. White sky, heavy and oppressive, spitting a constant, biting flurry of snow. The only sound was the groaning crunch of the ship's reinforced hull pushing through the ice pack and the lonely howl of the wind. Atmospheric temperature is -47 degrees Celsius and falling, Lillie announced, her voice calm and professional despite the ominous reading on the holographic display. She was a natural at the ship's helm, her fingers dancing across the consoles, monitoring a dozen systems at once. Air pressure is stable. No detectable life signs outside the vessel. Ash stood beside her, his arms crossed, staring out at the desolate landscape. The ship's internal heaters kept the cabin a comfortable temperature, but he could feel the profound cold seeping through the reinforced plasteel, a cold that felt ancient and absolute. Even Pikachu, nestled in a fleece-lined hammock Burnet had packed for him, was subdued, his usual vibrant energy muted by the oppressive atmosphere. They had followed the coordinates. The final data point in Moan's log had led them not to a void in space, but through a dangerously unstable wormhole that had deposited them here, in a polar region of a world that was not their own. It was a place that felt profoundly, fundamentally wrong. There, Ash said, pointing. His eyes, honed by years of spotting elusive Pokémon in dense forests and shadowy caves, had picked up on a flicker of something that wasn't white. A dark shape, barely visible against the distant, jagged peaks of a glacier. Is that it? Lillie enhanced the forward view. The image on the main screen zoomed in, sharpening. The dark shape resolved into a structure. A low-slung, hexagonal building, half buried in snow, its metallic surface pitted and scarred by the relentless wind. A single, dark antenna pointed accusingly at the gray sky. It matches the schematics for an Ether Foundation outpost Epsilon, Lillie confirmed, her voice a mixture of excitement and dread. A deep-range, self-sustaining research station. Father designed them himself. Her hands tightened on the controls. He was here. Navigating the final few miles was treacherous. The sea ice grew thicker, forcing Lillie to use the ship's short-range thermal cutters to carve a path. The wind buffeted the small vessel, threatening to drive it against the towering icebergs that loomed out of the snow-filled gloom like ghostly mountains. Ash acted as her spotter, his sharp senses calling out dangers before they appeared on the ship's sensors. They worked in perfect sync, a seamless unit against the hostile environment. They finally brought the Starlight Runner to a stop in a small, sheltered cove carved into the base of the glacier, the only place remotely safe from the punishing wind. The silence that fell when the engines powered down was absolute and unnerving. "We can't stay on the ship," Ash said, already pulling on the heavy, insulated Arctic gear they had brought. "If the ice shifts, it could crush the hull. We need to get to the outpost." "The outpost's life support systems are offline," Lillie reported, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. "External power source is showing 0. But the structural integrity is holding. And, there's a single, low-power energy signature still active inside. A backup battery, maybe. It's our only option," Ash decided. He clipped his pokeballs to the outside of his gear. The cold was too extreme for his Pokémon to be out for long, but he needed them ready. "Let's go." The moment the airlock door hissed open, the cold hit them like a physical blow. It was a savage, predatory cold that stole the breath from their lungs and burned their exposed skin. The wind was a physical force, trying to tear them from their footing. Lillie stumbled, and Ash grabbed her arm, steadying her. They were roped together for safety, a thin lifeline in the vast, indifferent whiteness. The trek to the outpost was a brutal, 100-yard struggle against the elements. The snow was deep, hiding treacherous crevasses of blue-black ice. The wind drove sharp ice crystals into their faces, and the sheer, overwhelming white of the landscape was disorienting, making it hard to tell where the ground ended and the sky began. They relied on each other, on the rope that bound them, shouting encouragement back and forth over the shriek of the wind. When they finally reached the outpost, its metallic wall providing a welcome shield from the gale, they were both panting, their breath pluming in the frigid air. The main door was sealed tight, frozen shut. "No power to the door controls," Lillie shouted, her voice muffled by her hood. "It's a manual override, but it's frozen solid." Ash didn't waste time. He unclipped a pokeball from his belt. "Torracat, I need your help." The Fire Cat Pokemon appeared in a flash of red light, shivering immediately despite his fiery nature. He looked around at the icy hellscape, his eyes wide with displeasure. The bell on his neck was cold to the touch. I know, you hate the cold," Ash said, kneeling beside him. "But I need a favor. Can you heat up this lock for me? A quick ember, as hot as you can make it." Torracat gave a reluctant meow, but trusted his trainer. He took a deep breath, and a concentrated jet of brilliant orange flame blasted against the manual wheel lock. The ice hissed and steamed, melting away in seconds. The metal of the wheel glowed a dull red. "Great job, Torracat. Return." Ash recalled the Fire Cat before the cold could sap his strength. He grabbed the now scorching wheel with his gloved hands and, with a grunt of effort, wrenched it open. The heavy door groaned in protest, then slid open into darkness. They stumbled inside, into the pitch-black, silent interior of the outpost. Ash sealed the door behind them, and the roar of the wind was instantly cut off, replaced by a silence that was somehow even more profound. The air inside was just as cold, but at least it was still. Lillie activated the powerful flashlight on her suit. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small decontamination chamber, everything coated in a thin layer of frost. "The low-power signature is coming from the main lab, 2 levels down," she said, her voice echoing in the confined space. They moved through the dead station like ghosts, their flashlights a pair of dancing eyes in the oppressive dark. The place was a frozen time capsule. A mug of coffee sat on a desk, its contents a solid block of brown ice. A datapad lay on the floor, its screen shattered. In the residential quarters, a bed was neatly made, a book left open on the pillow. It was as if everyone had simply vanished in an instant. The sense of profound, lonely abandonment was a heavy weight on Ash's shoulders. They found the main lab at the heart of the station. It was a large, circular room, the walls lined with dark, dead monitors. In the center of the room was a single, large holographic interface, the source of the faint power reading. A single blinking cursor on its dark surface was the only sign of life in the entire facility. "Father's personal research terminal," Lillie whispered, her voice filled with awe and sorrow. She approached it, her gloved fingers hovering over the controls. He must have routed all remaining power to this to preserve the data. She touched the screen. It flickered to life, displaying a single file, Final Log, Umbra Protocol. "This is it," she breathed. She took a deep, shaky breath, and looked at Ash. He gave her a nod of encouragement. She pressed the file. A holographic image of Moan flickered into existence above the terminal. He looked older than in the family photos, his face etched with exhaustion and a terrible, grim understanding. He was wearing the same kind of Arctic gear they were, and behind him, the view screen of his lab showed not the icy landscape outside, but the swirling, chaotic void of an unstable wormhole. The log was recorded from his ship, just before he landed here. Log entry. "I don't even know what day it is anymore," Moan's recorded voice said, rough with fatigue. "I was wrong. So wrong. I thought I was tracking a new, unique Ultra Beast signature. A predator. I didn't realize. I wasn't the predator. I was the prey." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's a consciousness of sorts, but not like anything we know. It doesn't live. It unlives. It consumes. Not matter, not energy, potential. Choice. Life. I've named it the Umbra Animus. It's a parasite from a dimension of pure nothingness. And it's leaking. The Moan in the hologram looked directly at the recording device, his eyes filled with a desperate urgency, as if trying to reach through time. Luzamin, my love, if you are seeing this, you must understand. The ultra beasts you are so fascinated by, they are just the fauna of the dimensions closest to ours. This is something else entirely. This is the predator that hunts the gods themselves. A new image appeared beside him, a complex astronomical chart. My readings confirm my worst fears. The animus is contained, held in balance, by a force of immense light. The legends of Alola, they speak of the blinding one. Necrozma. Its light is the lock on the prison door of this void. But Necrozma's power has been scattered, weakened. The lock is failing. The animus is starting to seep through the cracks. Ash and Lillie exchanged a horrified look. The incident with the Ultra Recon Squad, the battle to restore light to their world, it had consequences they never could have imagined. By saving Necrozma, they had unknowingly weakened the cage holding back a far greater evil. I was able to track a significant leak to these coordinates, Moan continued, his voice growing more strained. Kalen, that madman, he isn't just observing it. He's calling to it. He thinks he can control it, use it to impose his sick vision of silent order on the world. He's a fool. You don't reason with a hurricane. You don't bargain with a black hole. A massive jolt rocked the recording, and red alert lights began to flash in Moan's lab. It's found me, he said, his voice dropping to a grim whisper. It knows I'm here. I'm going to make landfall at the outpost and attempt to set up a resonance dampener. Try to sever Kalen's connection. I don't know if it will work. My ship is already compromised. He looked at the camera one last time, his face softening with a heartbreaking sadness. Lillie. Gladden. My children. Know that your father loves you. Live in the light. Always, the recording suddenly dissolved into a shriek of static. A new symbol flashed on the screen, the same perfect, light-devouring black circle they had seen before. The terminal let out a piercing, high-pitched alarm, a sound that sliced through the dead silence of the station. No, Lillie gasped, stumbling back. It's not a log entry, it's a trap. Ash's blood ran cold. A distress beacon. The alarm wasn't a cry for help. It was a dinner bell. Moan hadn't activated it. Kalen had, rigging the final log to alert his forces the moment it was played. A deep, resonant boom echoed from outside the station, followed by another. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of something massive landing on the ice. They're here, Ash said, his hand already on a pokeball. Lillie, find a place to hide. Find another way out of here. There's a maintenance shaft behind this terminal, she said, her training kicking in, overriding her fear. It leads to the lower generator bay. Another boom, closer this time, shook the entire station. A metallic screech echoed from the direction of the main entrance as something began to tear the door apart. Go. I'll hold them off. Ash yelled, positioning himself between Lillie and the corridor. Ash, no. You can't fight them alone, she cried. I won't be alone, he shot back, his face a mask of grim determination. He enlarged 2 pokeballs. Lycanroc. Incineroar. Let's go. His 2 powerhouse Pokemon materialized beside him, their breath misting in the frigid air. Lycanroc let out a low growl, its eyes glowing green in the darkness. Incineroar's fiery belt pulsed with heat, a welcome source of warmth and power. The screeching from the entrance stopped, replaced by a series of heavy, thudding footsteps that were getting closer. Fast. Go, Lillie. Now. Ash commanded. Lillie hesitated for a heart-stopping moment, then turned and scrambled behind the terminal, wrenching open a hidden panel in the floor. She gave him one last, terrified look before disappearing into the darkness below. Ash turned back to face the corridor, his heart pounding. The thudding stopped just out of sight. The only sound was the hum of his own readiness. Then, they appeared. Two Pokémon shambled into the faint light spilling from the open shaft. They were an Aggron and a Metagross, but they were horrifically wrong. Their bodies were covered in jagged, crystalline growths of a dark, violet energy. Their eyes glowed with the same sickening light he had seen in the Snorlax, but this was 100 times more potent. The cold, empty static flooded Ash's mind, a wave of pure malevolence. These Pokémon weren't just infected. They were puppets, their minds completely overwritten by Kalen's void energy. Lycanroc, Stone Edge on the Aggron. Ash commanded. Incineroar, Darkest Lariat on the Metagross. His Pokémon launched their attacks. Pillars of stone erupted from the frozen floor, and Incineroar became a spinning cyclone of dark fire. The attacks slammed into their targets with brutal force. The corrupted Pokémon were thrown back, but they got up almost immediately, seemingly unfazed, no sound of pain, no sign of damage. They can't feel pain, Ash realized with a sickening lurch. There's nothing left in there to hurt. The corrupted Metagross retaliated, its 4 arms glowing with psychic energy. It lifted a dozen broken pieces of equipment from the floor and hurled them at Ash's team. The Aggron charged, its horn glowing with a dark energy that was a twisted mockery of a flash cannon. Incineroar, use your flames to melt the debris. Ash ordered. Lycanroc, meet that charge with Accelerock. The battle descended into a desperate, brutal brawl in the confines of the Dark Lab. It was unlike any battle Ash had ever fought. There was no strategy from his opponents, no finesse. Only relentless, overwhelming force. He was fighting zombies, machines of destruction. He and his Pokémon fought with everything they had, the room filled with the flash of fire, the crack of stone, and the shriek of tortured metal. They were holding their own, but barely. Ash knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Meanwhile, in the cramped maintenance shaft below, Lillie was navigating by the beam of her flashlight. The shaft opened into the generator bay, a cavernous, 2-story room filled with the silent, monolithic forms of the station's main power generators. The place felt like a tomb. Her mind was racing. Moan was here. He had to be. He wouldn't have just let himself be captured. He would have had a contingency plan. A place to hide, a final bastion. She scanned the room, her light playing over the massive machinery. Her eyes caught something. A set of blueprints, pinned to a corkboard, that she had overlooked on her way in. They were for the station's main cryogenerator. She ran over to it, her eyes scanning the complex diagram. And then she saw it. A small, handwritten annotation in the corner of the schematic, in her father's distinctive script. It wasn't a technical note. It was a drawing. A child's drawing of a flower, a design she herself had created when she was 5 years old and had programmed as the screensaver on his personal datapad. Next to it was an arrow, pointing to a small, unlabeled access panel on the side of the main cryocontainment unit. He left me a clue, she whispered, her heart soaring with a desperate hope. She rushed to the massive cryo unit, a towering cylinder of frosted metal. She found the panel, almost invisible against the complex machinery. It was locked, but not with a keycard. It had a simple, 5-digit keypad. A code. What would the code be? She thought back, her mind racing through memories. Her birthday. The Foundation's establishment date. No, it would be something only he would know, something personal. The flower, her drawing. Then it hit her. The day she had given him that drawing. It was for his birthday. May 22nd. 0-5-2-2, it was only 4 digits. What was the 5th? She tried it. Nothing. She tried her own birthday. Nothing. Above her, a massive explosion rocked the station, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Ash was in trouble. She was running out of time. Think, Lillie, think. What was important to him? Her, Gladion, mother, and his work. The date she gave him the drawing. 0522, what else? What was the first thing he did every morning? He'd check on the status of his favorite research project, Project 1. Mew. Her fingers flew across the keypad. 0-5-2-2-1, a soft click echoed in the silent room. The panel slid open. Behind it was not a mess of wires, but another, smaller keypad and a single, red button. A manual release for an emergency cryostasis chamber hidden within the main generator. A chamber that wasn't on any official schematic. A panic room. Her hands trembling, she pressed the button. With a loud hiss of depressurizing gas, a section of the main cylinder slid away, revealing a small, coffin-sized pod within. The front was a pane of frosted-over cryoglass. Lillie frantically wiped it away with her glove. And her heart stopped. Inside, bathed in a soft blue light, was a man. It was her father. It was Moan. He was alive. His chest rose and fell in a slow, almost imperceptible rhythm. But his eyes were open, staring blankly ahead, seeing nothing. His face, which should have been filled with joy or relief, was utterly, terrifyingly vacant. A thin silver headband was wrapped around his temples, wires from it leading to a small device attached to the side of the pod. The device was dark, but a tiny red light on it blinked with a slow, malevolent pulse. As Lillie stared in horror, she realized what she was looking at. Her father's body was here, preserved. But his mind, his memories, his very essence, they had been drained away. The empty expression on his face was the look of a man whose soul had been stolen. Upstairs, the battle reached its crescendo. Ash was on the defensive, Lycanroc and Incineroar bruised and panting. The corrupted Agron slammed its tail into a support pillar, bringing a section of the ceiling crashing down, separating Ash from the exit. He was trapped. Just as the Metagross raised its claws for a final, devastating meteor mash, a piercing shriek echoed from the shaft. Ash! Lillie appeared, her face pale with terror and grief, tears streaming down her cheeks. We have to go. Now. I found him. But we have to go. Seeing her, seeing the raw agony on her face, gave Ash a surge of adrenaline. He would not fail her. He would not let her lose her father again. Incineroar, Flare Blitz. Full power. Clear a path. Ash roared. Incineroar became a living comet. Engulfed in a suicidal aura of intense fire, he charged not at the enemy Pokémon, but at the collapsed debris blocking the way. He slammed into the pile of metal and stone with the force of a missile. The explosion was deafening. The debris was vaporized, and a hole was blasted through the exterior wall of the station, opening directly into the howling, white chaos of the storm outside. The backlash from the flare blitz sent Incineroar collapsing to the floor, heavily damaged but successful. Lillie, get your father. Ash yelled, recalling his exhausted Pokémon. We're leaving. He grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the generator bay. She led him to the open pod, and together, they managed to release the stasis unit. It was heavy, but on a low-gravity slide, they could move it. They pushed the pod, with Moan's catatonic form inside, towards the hole Incineroar had made. The corrupted Pokémon were right behind them, their movements relentless. Ash turned, grabbing his last active Pokémon. Pikachu. Thunderbolt. All you've got. Buy us some time. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder and unleashed a massive wave of electricity, engulfing the two corrupted monsters, holding them back for a precious few seconds. They shoved the stasis pod through the hole and out onto the ice. The wind was a physical wall, trying to push them back. Ash and Lillie scrambled out after it, the cold searing their lungs. The Starlight Runner was 100 yards away, a lifetime away. "We're not going to make it," Lillie cried, her tears freezing on her cheeks. "Yes, we are," Ash shouted, his voice a raw force of will against the storm. He saw the corrupted Agron and Metagross climbing out of the ruined station behind them. They were out of time. Ash made a split-second decision. He put his fingers to his mouth and let out a piercing whistle, a signal he and his Pokémon had practiced but never used. A call for a last resort. From the ship, a red beam of light shot out. A massive shape materialized on the ice beside the Starlight Runner. It was Melmetal, its huge body a fortress of liquid metal. "Melmetal!" Ash roared, his voice barely audible over the wind. Double Iron Bash. On the ice. In front of them. Melmetal understood. Its massive hexnut fists began to spin, glowing with a brilliant steel energy. It slammed them into the thick sea ice with titanic force. The ice cracked, groaned, and then shattered, a massive fissure tearing across the cove, separating the station from the ship. The two corrupted Pokémon, caught on the wrong side, slid with a huge plate of ice into the churning, black water below and disappeared. "Now, Melmetal! Get the pod!" The giant Pokémon waded through the shallow water of the cove, grabbed the stasis pod in one of its massive hands as gently as if it were a cradled egg, and carried it back to the ship. Ash grabbed Lillie, who was on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion and grief, and half-carried, half-dragged her towards the safety of the ship. They scrambled up the ramp just as Melmetal placed the pod safely inside. Ash sealed the airlock, and the roar of the storm was cut off once more. They were safe. He collapsed against the wall, his body screaming with exhaustion, his mind reeling. He looked at Lillie, who had sunk to her knees beside the cryopod, her hand pressed against the cold glass, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He looked at the blank, empty face of the man inside. They had found him. They had won the battle. But as Ash looked at the horrifying reality of what had been done to Lillie's father, it felt sickeningly, devastatingly like a loss. Chapter 5, The Sovereign's Gambit. The return to Alola was not a triumph. It was a funeral procession. The vibrant, sun-drenched colors of home felt garish and mocking after the stark white of the world they had left behind. As the Starlight Runner docked at Ether Paradise, a heavy, somber silence replaced the usual cheerful bustle of the conservation area. Luzmin was the first one up the ramp. Her composure, always so immaculate, crumbled the moment she saw the cryopod. She let out a choked, wounded sound, her hand flying to her mouth as she stared at the vacant face of the man she loved. Gladion was right behind her, his usual stoic mask cracking, revealing a raw, vulnerable grief. He placed a hand on his mother's shoulder, his own eyes fixed on the shell of his father. The Ether family, so recently on the verge of being whole, was fractured anew, this time by a wound that seemed impossible to heal. They moved Moan to the Foundation's most advanced medical wing. Burnet flew in from Melee, her scientific curiosity eclipsed by a deep, maternal concern for her found family. She and Luzmin, once women on opposite ends of a scientific and ethical spectrum, were now united, a formidable team of two of the brightest minds in the world, poring over the data from the pod, their faces grim under the cold, sterile lights of the lab. The diagnosis was chilling. "It's not brain damage, not in any conventional sense," Burnet explained, her voice low, as she showed Ash and Lillie the scans on a holographic display. Moan's brain was physically unharmed. The device on his head, it didn't destroy his memories. It seems to have extracted them. The neural pathways are still there, but they're dormant, empty. It's like a library, where all the books have been stolen, leaving only empty shelves. His life force, his very spirit, it's been siphoned away, Luzmin added, her voice hollow. The energy signature of the device matches the void energy Kalen was researching. He used my husband as a battery. The pure, cold horror of it settled over them. Kalen hadn't just defeated Moan. He had desecrated him, turning him into a resource. Lillie, who had been listening with a terrifying stillness, finally spoke. "Can you fix him?" Her voice was quiet, fragile, but held a core of unbreakable steel. Burnet and Luzman exchanged a look, a silent conversation of complex theories and heartbreaking probabilities. "We don't know, sweetie," Burnet said gently, her honesty more comforting than any false hope. "This is uncharted territory. But we are not going to stop trying. I promise you that." This somber promise, this vigil over a stolen soul, was exactly the distraction Kalen had been counting on. While the heart of Alola was focused inward, consumed by grief and medical mysteries, he made his move. His gambit was not a subtle infiltration or a single act of terror. It was a region-wide declaration of war. It began on Akala Island. A network of devices, hidden for months, maybe years, disguised as weather sensors on mountaintops, buried as geological surveyors near the ruins of life, integrated into communications relays in Paniola town, all activated at once. They were reverse resonance emitters, designed not to dampen energy, but to amplify it, to tear a hole in the fabric of reality. They were all focused on a single point high in the sky above the altar of the sun on Pony Island. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. In Paniola town, the gentle mill tank and toros suddenly bellowed in agony, their eyes flashing with the now familiar violet corruption, and began to stampede through the peaceful ranch, their minds overwritten by a cold, destructive imperative. On the lush routes of Uluula Island, Vikavolt and Rabambi, once content to gather nectar, turned on each other in a mindless, savage frenzy. Unstable, shimmering pockets of ultra-space, no bigger than a pokeball, began to flicker in and out of existence across all 4 islands, spitting out disoriented, panicked ultra-beasts, a Xurkitree in the middle of Hawali's shopping district, a Celesteela crashing into the sea near the Hanno Grand Resort, before snapping shut again. It was chaos. A symphony of madness orchestrated from afar. The world seemed to be coming apart at the seams. And at the center of it all, high above the ancient altar, the sky began to bleed. A tiny, dark speck appeared, and began to grow, a vortex of swirling purple and black energy that crackled with power, a nascent, permanent gateway for the Umbra Animus itself. The first alert that reached Ash was a frantic call from Kiawe. "Ash! It's well a volcano. The Pokémon, they're going crazy. Attacking the trial site. The ground is shaking. It feels wrong." Before he could even process that, another call came in from Lana, her voice strained over the sound of crashing waves. "There's a thing in the water off Brooklet Hill. It looks like a buzzwole, but it's wrong. It's attacking everything." My Poplio, the calls kept coming, a flood of panic from every corner of the region. The Ranger Union was overwhelmed. The island kahunas were mobilizing, but they were scattered, trying to contain dozens of incidents at once. Alola was under siege. Ash stood on the observation deck of Ether Paradise, his Rotom phone buzzing incessantly with new reports. He watched the chaos unfolding on a dozen holographic screens, his fists clenched, a storm of fury and terror brewing inside him. He felt helpless, a single person against a tidal wave of destruction. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Kukui, his face grim, his usual easy smile gone, replaced by the hardened expression of a man facing the fight of his life. "This is it, Ash. This is what you were chosen for. Not just to win battles. To lead one." Kukui's words were a lightning strike, cutting through the fog of Ash's despair. He wasn't just a boy who loved Pokémon. He wasn't just a league winner. He was the champion. The sovereign. In a time of crisis, when all other authority was fractured, the people would look to him. A profound, terrifying clarity washed over Ash. The weight of it was immense, a crown far heavier than any trophy. But he did not shy away from it. He embraced it. He turned to face Kukui, and the fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fire that burned brighter than well a volcano. "Get me a region-wide communication channel. Now, Ash commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that was absolute. He was no longer a student or a son. He was a commander. Within minutes, he was the voice of Alola. His face was on every public screen, his voice on every emergency broadcast frequency, his Rotom phone patched into the Kahunas, the Rangers, and the Ether Foundation's command center. "This is Champion Ash Ketchum," his voice rang out, steady and unwavering, a beacon of calm in the storm of panic. "I know you're scared. But we are not broken. We are Alola. We are a family. And we will defend our home." He began to issue orders, his mind working with a speed and clarity he didn't know he possessed. It was like a Pokemon battle on a godlike scale, moving pieces across a map of the entire region. Kahuna Hala. The stampede in Paniola is a diversion. Kalen's device is on the peak of Mount Hokulani. I need you and Sophocles to get there and destroy it. Take anyone you can spare. Lana, Mallow. Forget the corrupted Pokemon for now. Find the device near Brooklet Hill. It's the source. It will be disguised, but it will be putting out a dark energy you can feel. Overload it with your Z moves. Kiawe. I need you at the altar of the sun. That vortex is the main target. Keep anything from coming through it. I'm sending backup. He turned to Gladion, who had appeared at his side, his face a mask of grim readiness, Silvally already materialized beside him. Gladion, I need you on Ulula. Your Silvally can handle any Pokemon type. You're our rapid response. Hit the biggest threats, clear a path for the others. Be the blade. Gladion didn't need any more encouragement. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his role, and was gone, leaping onto his Noivern and streaking into the sky. Luzamin. Ash's voice commanded the Ether President's full attention. Your Foundation's resources are our eyes and ears. I need real-time satellite imagery of all 4 islands. Pinpoint every energy spike, every Ultra Beast manifestation. And I need your fleet deployed. Not to fight, but to evacuate. Get people away from the hotspots. Now. Luzamin, her personal grief locked away behind a wall of pure will, nodded sharply. You have it, champion. The full, formidable might of the Ether Foundation pivoted to follow his commands. He was a whirlwind of strategic command, a nexus of information and action. He wasn't just directing forces, he was inspiring them. His unwavering confidence, his clear and decisive orders, they were a rallying cry that cut through the fear and chaos. He showed them a path to victory, and they followed without hesitation. With the defense of the islands underway, he turned his attention to the heart of the problem, the vortex above the altar of the sun. Kukui, he said, his voice low and intense. I'm going to the altar. I need you with me. I'm right behind you, Ash, Kukui said, his hand already on Incineroar's pokeball. They took the fastest transport Ether had, a prototype jet-powered craft, and streaked across the sea towards Pony Island. As they approached, the scale of Kalen's gambit became terrifyingly clear. The vortex was now a massive, swirling wound in the sky, a kilometer wide, pulling clouds and light into its dark, hungry maw. The air around the altar crackled with raw, unstable energy. They landed hard, the jet skidding on the ancient stone. Kiawe was already there, his Turtonator a bulwark of fire and shell, holding back a tide of corrupted Pokemon, Salazzle, Kamo, Mudstale, that were trying to swarm the altar. Ash. I can't hold them for much longer. Kiawe yelled, sweat pouring down his face, the heat from his Zeering palpable. They just keep coming. You don't have to hold them. You just had to buy me time. Ash shouted back. Fall back. Form a perimeter with the professor. Ash ran forward, sliding to a stop in the center of the altar, directly beneath the terrifying vortex. He could feel its pull, a cold, sickening gravity that tugged not just at his body, but at his soul. He looked up into the swirling abyss. And then he saw him. Floating in the very center of the vortex, suspended in the eye of the storm, was Kalen. He was no longer just a man. The raw void energy he had stolen, the power siphoned from Moan, the amplified chaos from his devices across Alola, he had channeled it all into himself. His body was a silhouette of pure black, his form indistinct and shifting. The only recognizable features were his eyes, which burned with a cold, violet light, and the cruel, calm smile on his face. He had become a vessel, a self-made god of nothingness. Impressive, Kalen's voice echoed, not through the air, but directly inside Ash's mind. It was a voice stripped of all emotion, as cold and empty as the void he commanded. You rally them. You give them hope. A foolish, fleeting emotion. The last flicker of a dying candle. This world isn't yours to break, Kalen. Ash yelled, his own voice a raw defiance against the psychic intrusion. Break? Kalen's mental voice was laced with something that might have been amusement. No. I am not breaking it. I am healing it. I am granting it the gift of peace. The perfect, beautiful silence of non-existence. The chaos you see is merely the fever breaking. Soon, the patient will be still. Ash felt a surge of pure, righteous fury. He thrust his Zirang into the air. Pikachu. Let's show him what real power is. 10 million volt thunderbolt. He and Pikachu moved as one, their bond a blazing sun against the encroaching darkness. The familiar, spectacular display of rainbow energy erupted, a torrent of pure life and power that lanced up from the altar and struck the godlike figure in the heart of the storm. For a moment, the light consumed the darkness. But then, the impossible happened. The void around Kalen didn't break. It absorbed the attack. The 10 million volt thunderbolt, a move of legendary power, was simply swallowed by the nothingness, vanishing without a trace. Kalen laughed, a soundless, chilling laugh that echoed in the minds of everyone on the island. Your light is finite, champion. My void is infinite. This is a war you have already lost. He raised a hand, and a bolt of pure black energy, a negation of light and life, shot down from the vortex. Ash, look out! Kukui screamed. Ash didn't have time to move. But he didn't have to. In a flash of red and black, Lycanroc leaped in front of him, taking the full force of the blast. The dusk form wolf didn't even have time to cry out. He simply ceased. The void energy didn't injure him, it unmade him, causing his form to flicker and dissolve. With a final, sorrowful look at Ash, he was forcibly returned to his Pokeball in a flash of red light, his life force critically damaged. The backlash of the attack sent Ash flying, his psychic connection with Kalen shattering. He landed hard on the stone, his head ringing. He scrambled to Lycanroc's Pokeball, clutching it to his chest, feeling the terrifying coldness emanating from it, the near absence of his partner's familiar warmth. Reports started flooding in. The device on Hokulani is destroyed. Sophocles' voice crackled. We did it. Mallow's triumphant cry followed. Akala is clear. One by one, the devices were being destroyed. The flow of amplifying energy to the vortex was being cut off. But it was too late. Kalen had absorbed enough. He had become a self-sustaining nexus of power. The vortex no longer needed the devices to grow. He descended slowly from the sky, landing on the far side of the altar. His form solidified, resolving into a tall, black-clad figure wreathed in a constant, shimmering aura of dark energy. He was a black hole in human form. Your friends have won their little battles, Kalen said, his voice now audible, chillingly calm. It no longer matters. The gateway is self-sufficient. I am self-sufficient. He looked at Ash, his eyes burning with cold fire. I came to grant this world a gift, but you, with your noise and your pointless emotion, you stand in the way. So be it. I will simply erase you first. A champion of light is no match for a sovereign of shadow. He smiled, a terrifying, passionless expression. "Now you see the truth, Ash Ketchum. You are not a hero. You are just an obstacle." Before Ash could react, Kalen raised his hand again, and then, with a flicker of dark energy, he vanished, leaving only the dying vortex in the sky and the profound, psychic chill of his presence. The vortex, starved of its power source, began to shrink, collapsing in on itself until it finally winked out of existence, leaving a wounded, bruised-looking sky. The corrupted Pokémon across the region, their puppet master gone, slumped to the ground, falling into a deep, comatose state. The immediate crisis was over. Alola was saved. Ash stood up, his body aching, his mind reeling. He looked at Lycanroc's ball in his hand, at the retreating forms of his friends who had fought and bled for their home. They had won. They had followed his lead, and they had won. But as he stared at the spot where the self-proclaimed god of silence had stood, he knew this was not the end. It was the end of the beginning. Kalen was no longer just a scientist. He was a monster of their own making, a divine-level threat born from a twisted ideology. And he had made it personal. The battle for Alola was over. The war for the world was just beginning. Chapter 6, Scars and Solace. Alola was quiet. It was a heavy, wounded silence, starkly different from the region's usual vibrant hum. The physical scars were already being tended to, the rangers and a legion of volunteers were repairing fences in Paniola town, replanting ravaged berry fields on Akala, and clearing debris in Hawali City. The comatose Pokémon, freed from Kalen's influence, had been gathered by the Ether Foundation and were being cared for, their bodies slowly healing, though when their minds would awaken, no one knew. The physical battle was over, but the psychological one was just beginning. The weight of it all settled on Ash's shoulders like a physical shroud. The victory felt hollow, a temporary reprieve in a war he now understood was far from over. He stood on the starlit beach behind Kukui's house, the same beach where he'd once celebrated his championship, but the gentle lapping of the waves brought no comfort. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, but he wasn't seeing the moonlight on the water. He was seeing Kalen's cold, violet eyes. He was feeling the sickening unmaking of Lycanroc. The pokeball in his hand was cool to the touch, no longer emanating the terrifying cold from the battle, but lacking its usual familiar warmth. Nurse Joy had done all she could. Lycanroc was stable, his life force slowly regenerating, but the wound was not physical. It was spiritual. It's like a part of his very essence was erased, she had explained, her voice hushed with a kind of clinical awe. He needs rest. But more than that, he needs you. Your bond is the only thing that can guide him back. Ash had tried. He had spent hours sitting with Lycanroc's pokeball, pouring his own energy, his own aura, into it. He could feel his partner, a faint, flickering ember in the dark, but he couldn't seem to reach him. There was a wall between them, a scar of pure void that Ash's light couldn't seem to penetrate. And so, he trained. He didn't know what else to do. The feeling of helplessness was a poison, and the only antidote he knew was action. From dawn until dusk, he was a blur of motion. He pushed his Pokémon, Pikachu, Incineroar, Rowlet, even the mighty Melmetal, to their absolute limits, and then passed them. The training sessions with Kukui were no longer just high-energy fun, they were brutal, desperate affairs. Again. Ash's voice was raw, shouting over the roar of an inferno overdrive that scorched the sand. It's not strong enough. He absorbed a 10 million volt thunderbolt. Our strongest attacks are nothing to him. We have to be stronger. Faster. Pikachu, panting heavily, his small body trembling with exhaustion, looked up at his partner. He saw the frantic, haunted look in Ash's eyes. This wasn't the familiar fire of a passionate trainer. This was the cold, consuming burn of fear. Pikachu pushed himself to his feet, cheeks sparking weakly, ready to go again, because that's what he always did. He would follow Ash to the ends of the earth and beyond. Kukui watched from the sidelines, his arms crossed, a deep line of worry creasing his brow. Ash, that's enough for today, he called out, his voice firm. They're exhausted. You're exhausted. We can't be. Ash shot back, not looking at him. Kalen isn't resting. He's out there somewhere, planning, getting stronger. What are we supposed to do when he comes back? We were lucky this time. Luck isn't a strategy. His obsession became a wall, not just between him and his Pokemon's well-being, but between him and his family. He was a ghost in the house, rising before dawn, returning after dusk, eating his meals in silence, his mind 1,000 miles away. He barely registered Burnet's attempts to talk to him about his champion duties or Kukui's invitations to just sit and watch TV. He was isolating himself, building a fortress of frantic activity around his fear. And it was creating a rift between him and Lillie. She saw the change in him with a painful clarity. The confident, reassuring boy who had held her hand and promised to find her father was being consumed by the grim, obsessive soldier who had faced a god and seen his own powerlessness. She would come down to the beach to bring him a drink, and he would barely acknowledge her, his eyes locked on Pikachu's next drill. She would try to talk to him, to share some small piece of progress she and her mother had made, and he would nod absently, his thoughts clearly on battle simulations and power levels. The breaking point came one evening, a week after the attack. Lillie found him on the beach long after the sun had set, long after his Pokémon had been recalled, their exhausted forms a silent testament to the day's brutal regimen. He was just standing there, staring out at the dark water, his shoulders slumped in a way that spoke of a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical exertion. She walked up to him, her heart aching. "Ash," she said softly. He flinched, as if startled from a trance. "Lillie. I didn't hear you." "You never do, anymore," she said, her voice quiet but edged with a pain she could no longer hide. "You're here, but you're not. It's like you're 1,000,000 miles away." "I have to be," he said, his voice flat. "I have to figure out how to beat him." "By running yourself and your Pokémon into the ground," she countered, a spark of frustration flaring. "Pikachu is so tired he can barely stand, Ash. Incineroar has pushed himself to the point of injury twice this week. This isn't training. It's punishment. It's what we have to do," he snapped, turning to face her, his eyes blazing with a desperate, defensive anger. "What do you want me to do, Lillie? Sit around and wait for him to come back and erase everything? He nearly killed Lycanroc. He could have killed all of us. I was supposed to be the champion, the one to protect everyone, and I couldn't do anything. My best attack, it was like throwing a pebble into the ocean." The raw pain and fear in his voice stunned her, but her own fear for him was stronger. "So this is your answer? To build a wall around yourself? To shut everyone out? To carry the entire weight of the world on your own shoulders?" "Yes," he roared, the single word a cry of pure agony and frustration. "Because that's my job. I'm the champion. It's my responsibility to be strong enough." "No, it's not," she cried back, her own voice rising, tears of anger and hurt welling in her eyes. "Your job is to be part of a team. To trust your friends. To trust me. But you're not doing that. You're pushing us all away. You're pushing me away." The accusation hung in the air between them, raw and undeniable. Ash stared at her, the anger in his face faltering, replaced by a look of profound, wounded shock. He saw the tears on her cheeks, the hurt in her eyes, and it was like a physical blow. He had been so consumed by his own fear of failing that he hadn't seen he was failing the person who mattered most to him, right here, right now. "Lillie. He started, his voice cracking. "I'm scared too, Ash," she said, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. She took a hesitant step closer to him. "Every time I look at my father, I see what Kalen is capable of. I see that emptiness, and I am terrified. But I am not alone in that terror. I have my mother. I have Gladon. I have Burnet and Kukui. Her gaze met his, pleading. And I thought I had you. But the person standing in front of me isn't the Ash I know. The Ash I know would never turn his back on his family. He would lean on them. Her words cut through the fortress he had built around his heart. The fear, the guilt, the crushing weight of responsibility he had been trying to bear alone, it all came crashing down. He looked at her, at the unwavering strength and love in her eyes, and his own defenses crumbled. A choked sob escaped him. I'm so scared, Lillie, he confessed, the words raw and broken. I'm terrified that I'm not strong enough. That next time, I'll have to watch as he takes one of you. And I won't be able to stop him. He finally admitted it. The deepest, darkest fear that had been driving him to the brink. Lillie closed the distance between them without a second thought, her arms wrapping around his waist, holding him tight. He was trembling. He buried his face in her shoulder, his own arms coming up to wrap around her as if she were the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. He held on to her, the strong, confident champion reduced to a terrified boy, and she held him right back, her quiet strength a solid anchor in his storm. You won't be alone, she whispered into his hair, her voice fierce and certain. You will never be alone. We are stronger together, Ash. That's your real power. Not your Z moves, not your battle strategies. It's the way you bring people together. It's the way you make us all stronger. Let us be strong for you now. He shuddered, a wave of cathartic relief washing over him. The tension that had held him rigid for days finally broke, and he just held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. They stood like that for a long time, under the silent watch of the moon, the sound of the waves a gentle rhythm. The argument, born of fear and pain, had stripped them down to their most vulnerable selves, and in that shared vulnerability, they found a new, deeper connection. He finally pulled back, just enough to look at her. He wiped a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb, his touch gentle. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I've been a jerk. I was so scared, I forgot. I forgot how to be me. I'm here to remind you, she said, offering him a small, watery smile. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in days. He saw not just the girl he cared for, but his partner, his equal, his source of strength. The feelings that had blossomed during their dance at the gala, the unspoken emotions that had carried them through the icy hell of their journey, they all coalesced in this single, perfect moment of raw, honest connection. He didn't plan it. He didn't think about it. He just acted. He leaned in and gently, tentatively, pressed his lips to hers. It was not a fiery, passionate kiss. It was a kiss of quiet desperation, of profound relief, of homecoming. It was an apology and a promise all in one. Lillie's breath hitched in surprise, but she didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her hand coming up to cup his cheek, her lips responding to his with a sweetness that sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated warmth through his entire being. It was a warmth that chased away the last of the void's lingering chill. When they finally broke apart, they rested their foreheads together, their breathing a little shaky. I love you, Lillie, Ash whispered, the words coming as naturally as breathing. He had never said them to anyone like this before, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that they were true. A single, happy tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her temple. I love you too, Ash, she replied, her voice full of a joy that felt like the sun rising after a long, dark night. Their relationship was no longer a budding possibility. It was a fact. A committed partnership forged in crisis, sealed in vulnerability, and now, finally, confessed in the quiet solace of the Alolan moonlight. He wasn't alone. They were a unit. And together, they were strong enough to face whatever darkness came next. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. In the Ether Foundation's deep archives, Lillie and Burnet were not looking for a weapon. They were looking for a cure. They scoured ancient texts, forgotten research, and obscure legends, searching for any mention of void energy or life force extraction, hoping to find a way to restore Mon. Luzman was with them, her grief now channeled into a fierce, scholarly focus. She brought them a set of scrolls that had been gifted to the Foundation by an old kahuna of Mele Island decades ago. They were thought to be simple folklore, creation myths. Most of this is allegorical, Luzman said, carefully unrolling a fragile parchment. Stories of the Tapu shaping the islands, of the blinding one bringing light to the world. Lillie leaned over the ancient text, her eyes scanning the intricate, faded script. The Alolan she had learned at the Pokemon school was formal, but this was a far older, more poetic dialect. This one is different, she murmured, pointing to a specific passage. It's not a creation myth. It's a prophecy. A warning. Burnet adjusted her glasses, peering at the text. What does it say? It speaks of the PLE hope, Lillie translated slowly, her brow furrowed in concentration. The starving night. The shadow that consumes. It describes a force from beyond the sky that envies the world of light and seeks to drink its color and silence its song. The Umbra Animus, Burnet breathed, a chill running down her spine. Exactly, Lillie confirmed, her excitement growing. But it says the shadow is not all-powerful. It has an antithesis. A poison. It calls it the Malamalama o Kauhane. The light of the soul, Luzman translated instantly, her voice filled with a sudden, dawning hope. Lillie's finger traced the final lines of the prophecy. It says the light of the soul is not a single thing, but a convergence. A perfect harmony. It requires 3 sources. She looked up at them, her eyes wide with the magnitude of her discovery. First, the sun's emissary and the moon's emissary, giving their blessing freely. Solgaleo and Lunala, Burnet whispered. Second, Lillie continued, her voice trembling slightly. The pure heart of the land, a human chosen by the guardians of the islands, one whose spirit is a beacon. Ash, Luzman said, the name a statement of fact. The Tapu had chosen him. He had wielded their Z-power. He was the beacon. And third? Burnet prompted, leaning in closer. Lillie looked at the final ingredient, her breath catching in her throat. The combined light must be focused, channeled through a vessel of pure potential, one who walks between the worlds of humans and Pokemon. They all looked at each other, the unspoken answer hanging in the air. Pikachu, Ash said, his voice filled with awe. He had been standing in the doorway, drawn by the excited energy from the lab, and had heard the whole thing. He walked into the room, Lillie's eyes immediately finding his, a brilliant, hopeful smile lighting up her face. The rift between them was gone, replaced by a renewed and unbreakable bond. This is it, Ash said, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. The desperate, frantic energy was gone, replaced by a calm, focused power. This is how we fight back. This is how we win. They didn't just have a defense anymore. They had a weapon. A path to victory, written in the stars and the ancient soul of Alola itself. And for the first time since he had faced Kalen in the sky, Ash Ketchum felt the cold knot of fear in his stomach dissolve, replaced by the familiar, blazing fire of hope. Chapter 7, The Sun, the Moon, and the Aura. The altar of the sun was a place of immense, primal power. The ancient stone platform, nestled in the heart of Pony Island's vast canyon, seemed to hum with a latent energy that vibrated up through the soles of their feet. The sky above was a flawless, piercing blue, the air crisp and clean. The scars from Kalen's vortex had faded, but a palpable tension remained, as if the very stones remembered the violation. Ash and Lillie stood in the center of the altar, side by side. Glad Ion was with them, not on the altar itself, but keeping a watchful perimeter, his Sylvelia silent, stoic sentinel pacing the canyon rim. He was their guardian, ensuring their ritual would be uninterrupted. There was no grand ceremony, no incantation. Following the guidance of the kahunas, they simply came with honest hearts and a clear purpose. Ash held the sun flute, its golden surface warm to the touch. Lillie held the moon flute, its silver form cool and serene. They had done this once before, to call forth the legendary Pokémon to save Luzaman. Now, they were here to ask for the power to save the world. They brought the flutes to their lips and played. The melodies intertwined, two separate songs that created a single, perfect harmony. The sun flute's notes were bold and bright, a call to action, a song of daylight and strength. The moon flute's response was soft and ethereal, a melody of mystery, intuition, and quiet power. The music flowed from them, not as a performance, but as a prayer, a pure expression of their shared hope and resolve. As the last note faded into the vast canyon, the air itself began to shimmer. The light and shadows on the altar swirled, coalescing. From the heart of the light, a magnificent, lion-like beast of white and gold emerged, its form radiating the warmth of a midday sun. Solgaleo. From the deepest shadows, a great, bat-like creature of violet and silver unfurled its wings, its presence as calming as a moonlit night. Lunala. They were not solid, not entirely. They were spectral, their forms shimmering with a faint translucence, their presence more spiritual than physical. They regarded the two humans before them, their ancient, intelligent eyes holding a deep, cosmic weariness. "You have called," Solgaleo's voice resonated in their minds, a sound like the distant roar of a solar flare. "And we have answered, the world is wounded," Lunala's voice added, a soft, melancholic whisper like the wind through a moon-dusted forest. "We feel the discord. The echo of the void. We are working to mend the tears in the veil, the pathways between worlds that the usurper damaged. It consumes much of our strength, we know," Ash said, stepping forward, his voice respectful but firm. He felt no fear, only a sense of profound connection. "We are not here to ask you to fight our battle for us. We are here to ask for your help to fight it ourselves." Lillie stepped forward to stand beside him. The ancient texts speak of a convergence. The light of the soul. It says we need your blessing. Solgaleo looked at Ash, its gaze piercing, seeming to see not just the boy, but the web of bonds that connected him to his Pokémon, his friends, his family. It saw the bright, burning core of his aura. The prophecy of the pure heart. "We have watched you, Ash Ketchum. We have seen you stand against the darkness before. You have earned our attention, but a blessing is not a tool to be given," Lunala added, its gaze turning to Lillie. It saw her intelligence, her compassion, and the unshakable resolve that had carried her across a frozen wasteland to find her father. "It is a bond to be forged. Power given without understanding is a dangerous thing. You must prove you are worthy vessels." "How?" Ash asked, his hand instinctively going to Pikachu's head for a reassuring scratch. "A battle?" "No," Solgaleo's voice rumbled. "We have seen you battle. We know your strength. This is a trial of a different kind. A trial of the heart. The void preys on fear, on despair, on doubt. To wield our light, you must first face the shadows within yourselves." Before they could ask what it meant, the world dissolved. The solid stone of the altar, the blue sky, the form of Glad Ion on the canyon rim, it all vanished. Ash and Lillie found themselves standing in an infinite, gray twilight. There was no ground, no sky, only a formless, directionless space. They were separated, standing a dozen feet apart, but the distance felt like miles. "Lillie?" Ash called out, his voice sounding small and flat in the unnatural silence. "I'm here," she called back, her voice tinged with alarm. Then, the illusions began. In front of Ash, the gray mist coalesced, forming a scene he had prayed he would never see again. The altar of the sun, under a bruised, black sky. Kukui, Burnet, his mother, all his friends, lay motionless on the stone, their forms dim and lifeless. And Lillie. Lillie stood beside Kalen, her eyes glowing with the same empty, violet light as the corrupted Pokémon, her face a blank mask. You see, the illusory Kalen said, his hand resting on Lillie's shoulder. Your strength was not enough. You failed them. You failed her. Your love, your bonds, they were just weaknesses for me to exploit. Now, she is mine. Silent. Perfect. A spear of pure, ice-cold terror lanced through Ash's heart. This was it. This was his deepest, most primal fear, given form. The failure he had been running from, the nightmare that had driven his obsessive training. His first instinct was to rage, to summon Pikachu and blast the horrifying vision to dust. But he remembered Lunala's words. Face the shadows within. This wasn't real. It was a test. A test of his spirit. He took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing himself to look past the horrifying image and focus on the real Lillie, who he could still see standing in her own pocket of mist, her face pale with fear. He focused on the real bond between them, the connection forged in honesty and sealed with a kiss on a moonlit beach. That was real. This was a lie. No, Ash said, his voice shaking but clear. You're wrong. My bonds aren't a weakness. They're my strength. Even if I fail, even if I lose, the love is real. And that's something your emptiness can never understand. It's a light you can never put out. He took a step towards the real Lillie, his gaze locked on hers, ignoring the monstrous illusion. As he did, the horrifying scene flickered, the image of the corrupted Lillie wavering like a bad hologram. He had faced his fear not with anger, but with faith. At the same time, Lillie was facing her own trial. The grey mist before her formed the medical bay at Ether Paradise. Her mother and Burnet stood before her, their faces etched with sorrow and defeat. We're sorry, Lillie, her mother's illusion said, her voice breaking. We've tried everything. The damage is too extensive. There's nothing left of your father to save. He's gone. The words were a physical blow, the confirmation of her most devastating fear. The hope she had clung to, the driving force of her entire journey, was a lie. Her quest had been for nothing. The image was so real, so plausible, that despair washed over her, a cold, heavy tide that threatened to drown her. What was the point of fighting Kalen if she had already lost the one person she was trying to save? Her strength wavered, and for a moment, she believed it. But then she heard Ash's voice, cutting through the fog of her despair. No. You're wrong. She looked past her own nightmare and saw him, walking towards her, his eyes full of unwavering belief in her, in them. He was facing his own demon, but he was still looking at her, drawing strength from her. And she realized she had to do the same. She thought of the real conversation she'd had with her mother and Burnet. Their promise. We are not going to stop trying. That was the truth. This despair was the lie. You're wrong, Lillie said, her voice finding its steel. She looked the illusion of her mother in the eye. You would never give up. Burnet would never give up. And I will never give up on him. We will find a way. We will bring him back. She took a step towards Ash, her own faith a shield against the illusion's poison. As she moved, her nightmare wavered, the medical bay dissolving back into grey mist. They met in the middle of the void, their hands finding each other, their fingers lacing together in a desperate, grounding grip. The illusions shrieked and swirled around them, throwing their worst fears at them, images of their Pokémon falling, of Alola in ashes, of Kalen triumphant, but they were just noise now. Anchored to each other, their shared faith a blazing shield, the phantoms had no power over them. They stood together in the heart of the psychic storm, unbowed and unbroken. And then, the world snapped back into place. They were on the altar again, the sun warm on their faces, their hands still tightly clasped. Solgaleo and Lunala stood before them, their spectral forms seeming more solid now, their eyes glowing with approval. You have faced the void in your own hearts and answered it with light, Solgaleo's voice boomed, filled with respect. You have proven your worth, the bond you share is strong, Lunala whispered. It will be your anchor in the storm to come. We will grant you our blessing. But we cannot interfere directly with Kalen. He is a mortal who has chosen his own path, however dark. Our power cannot be used to strike him down, we understand, Ash said. The prophecy says the light must be channeled through a vessel. He looked down at Pikachu, who was watching the exchange with an intelligence that went beyond a normal Pokémon. Solgaleo dipped its magnificent head. Its horn began to glow with the intensity of a star. A single, pure beam of golden, solar light shot out and enveloped Pikachu. Pikachu didn't cry out in pain. He arched his back, absorbing the energy, his body glowing from within. The solar power wasn't overriding his own electric energy, it was merging with it, amplifying it, elevating it to a legendary scale. At the same time, Lunala focused its power. But it didn't target Pikachu. It targeted Snowy, Lillie's Alolan Vulpix, who stood protectively at her feet. A beam of soft, silver, lunar light washed over Snowy. The little fox Pokémon glowed with a gentle, ethereal luminescence, her blue eyes taking on the deep, mysterious shimmer of a nebula. She was now a conduit for the moon's quiet, intuitive power. Your partners are now vessels, Solgaleo explained as the light faded. Ash Ketchum, your Pikachu now carries the fire of the sun. His power is the power of overwhelming light, a force to banish shadows, and Lillie, Lunala continued, your Vulpix now holds the heart of the moon. Her power is not one of force, but of clarity, of healing, of protection. She can soothe a corrupted mind, mend a wounded spirit, and reveal truths hidden in darkness. One is the sword, the other is the shield. You will need both, the blessing was complete. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, not with yellow lightning, but with golden, solar flares. Snowy's fur seemed to shimmer with captured moonlight. They were still themselves, still Ash and Lily's beloved partners, but they were also something more. As they stood there, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened, a sudden, urgent pulse of psychic energy washed over the altar. It wasn't from Solgaleo or Lunala. It was a cry for help, a frantic, universal message that every telepathically sensitive being in the world, human and Pokémon alike, would feel. Solgaleo and Lunala both stiffened, their immense power focusing on the incoming message. What is this? Lunala cried out in alarm. The message resolved itself in their minds into a single, terrifying image, a colossal, crystalline tree, glowing with a soft, internal light, its roots stretching deep into the core of the planet. And at its heart, a spreading corruption. A creeping, violet-black stain, emanating from a small, dark figure who was merging with the tree's central crystal. Kalen. The tree of beginning, Solgaleo roared, its voice filled with a fury that shook the very mountains. The heart crystal of the world's life force, Ash stared at the vision, his blood running cold. He recognized that place. He had been there before. He had met the guardian of the tree. Another, more focused psychic message followed the first, a small, playful, yet utterly terrified voice that only Ash could fully understand, a voice he knew. Mew, the vision became clearer. Kalen was not attacking Alola again. He hadn't fled to lick his wounds. His gambit in Alola had been a massive, elaborate feint, a way to gather power and divert the world's attention. His true target was never just a single region. It was the planet itself. He's not trying to build a gateway anymore, Ash said, the horrifying realization dawning on him. He's trying to poison the source. To infect the entire world's lifeblood with the void. If he succeeds, Lunala's voice was grim, he will not need to conquer the world. The world will simply stop. All life, all thought, all emotion, extinguished at the source. He seeks to lobotomize the planet, the final battlefield was not going to be in Alola. Kalen had taken the fight to the very heart of the world. We cannot leave, Solgaleo stated, its form flickering as it diverted more energy to repairing the dimensional pathways. Our duty is here. We must maintain the balance. This final battle, it must be yours. The legendary Pokémon began to fade, their forms dissolving back into light and shadow, their immense power needed elsewhere. Use our gifts well, children of Alola, was their final, fading message. Be the light that holds back the night. They were gone. Ash and Lillie were left standing on the silent altar, the weight of their new power and the terrible knowledge of Kalen's true plan settling upon them. Gladion leaped down from the canyon rim, his face pale. I felt it too. A voice, a warning. Ash looked at Lillie, his expression grim but resolute. He squeezed her hand. Then we'd better not keep him waiting. He turned to Gladion. We have to go. Now. The quest to heal a father had become a race to save a world. And the final confrontation was waiting for them at the beginning of all things. Chapter 8, The Champion of Light. The journey to the Tree of Beginning was a desperate, high-speed pilgrimage. Guided by the faint, frantic psychic trail left by Mew, they flew non-stop, swapping their regional ride Pokémon for faster, more durable flyers provided by the now fully mobilized International Ranger Union. The world below was a blur of blue ocean, green land, and white clouds. The scale of their task was immense, but their focus was singular, narrowed to a sharp, unwavering point. They made landfall in the shadow of a massive, snow-capped mountain range, the air thin and bitingly cold. The entrance to the tree was just as Ash remembered it, a series of crystalline caves hidden within the mountainside, glowing with a soft, internal light. But the light was different now. It was sickly, pulsating with a faint, nauseating violet rhythm, like a healthy body succumbing to a fever. The corruption was already spreading. As they entered the first cavern, they were met not by the curious, crystalline antibodies Ash had encountered before, but by a wall of people. They wore the stark, gray uniforms of Kalen's fanatical followers, ex-ether employees, disgraced researchers, and lost souls he had swayed to his nihilistic cause. Their faces were devoid of emotion, their eyes holding the placid, unnerving calm of true believers. The Master's work must not be disturbed, one of them said, his voice a monotone. The final piece is at hand. You will not interfere with salvation. We're not here to argue with you, Gladion said, his voice a low growl. He stepped forward, his hand on Silvely's pokeball. We're here to stop him. Stand aside. We will not. Their answer was to release their Pokémon. It was a horde of powerful, fully evolved creatures, golems, machamps, tyrannitars, but like their trainers, they were wrong. Their eyes held that same vacant, placid look. They weren't corrupted by void energy, but their spirits felt muted, their battle cries silent, their movements efficient and robotic. Kalen had found a way to suppress their spirits, turning them into willing, unfeeling soldiers. Lillie, go. Ash commanded, he and Gladion moving to form a wall in front of her. You and Snowy are the only ones who can heal the tree. We'll clear a path for you. Lillie didn't hesitate. She knew her role. She met Ash's eyes for a split second, a universe of trust passing between them, before she and Snowy darted past the forming battle line, deeper into the crystalline tunnels. Let's make this quick, Gladion, Ash said, a grim smile on his face. They want a silent world. Let's give them some noise. With pleasure, Gladion replied. What followed was not a battle. It was a storm. Ash and Gladion fought back to back, a seamless whirlwind of power and strategy. Gladion Silvely, equipped with a fighting-type memory, became a blur of motion, its multi-attack disabling Pokémon with precise, devastating strikes. Ash's Incineroar, fully recovered and burning with righteous fury, unleashed torrents of dark fire, his darkest lariat breaking through defensive lines. They were a symphony of destruction, two of Alola's strongest trainers fighting as one. They didn't aim to win, they aimed to overwhelm. They systematically disabled the fanatical army, their Pokémon's raw, passionate power a stark contrast to their opponent's silent obedience. Within minutes, the path was clear, the fanatics and their Pokémon subdued, left behind in the pulsing violet light of the outer caverns. Ash and Gladion raced after Lillie, following the trail of shimmering lunar energy left by Snowy. The corruption grew stronger the deeper they went, the very air becoming thick and heavy with the void's oppressive silence. They burst into the tree's central chamber, a cavern of breathtaking scale. The heart crystal, a colossal, multifaceted gem that should have been blazing with pure, life-giving light, was now a grotesque, cancerous thing. Veins of black and violet energy crawled across its surface, all emanating from the figure at its center. Kalen was almost fully merged with it, his human form dissolving into a being of pure shadow and corrupted crystal. He was the tumor at the heart of the world. And he was not undefended. As they entered, a creature of pure void materialized before Gladion, blocking his path. It was a monstrous construct of solidified shadow and jagged, dark crystal, vaguely shaped like a quadrupedal beast. Its face was a shifting mass of nothingness, but from its head sprouted three familiar, metallic feathers. It was a dark, twisted mockery of Sylvalee. "This abomination is mine," Gladion snarled, his eyes blazing with a personal fury. He had seen Kalen's disregard for life in what he did to his father. This blasphemous imitation of his partner was the final insult. "Sylvalee, let's show it what a real bond looks like." Crush Claw. Gladion and his dark mirror were locked in a brutal, personal duel, a clash of creation versus negation. At the same time, the crystalline antibodies of the tree, the golems of Regirock, Regice, and Registeel, began to activate. But their lights were violet. Their massive forms lumbered towards Lillie, their directive no longer to protect the tree, but to protect the corruption within it. Lillie didn't flinch. This was her battle. "Snowy, use your gift," she commanded. "Aurora Veil." Snowy didn't attack. The Alolan Vulpix closed her eyes, and a soft, shimmering curtain of lunar light descended around the legendary golems. It was not a wall of force, but a wave of pure, soothing energy. The violet in the golem's eyes flickered. The Aurora Veil was not fighting the corruption, it was reminding them of their true purpose. It was the shield Lunala had spoken of, a power of clarity and healing. "It's working!" Lillie cried, her voice filled with hope. "They're fighting it." Her role was clear. She couldn't fight Kalen directly, but she could be the tree's immune system, purifying its defenders, giving it the strength to fight back against the poison from within. She was a leader, a field medic, and a strategist, all in one. This left Ash. The path to Kalen was clear. He ran, Pikachu a golden blur on his shoulder, his feet eating up the distance across the crystalline floor. He leaped onto the base of the heart crystal, the corrupted energy making his skin crawl, and faced the self-made god. "It's over, Kalen," Ash's voice rang out, clear and defiant. Kalen turned his head, his form now more crystal than man. His lips, made of shifting shadow, pulled back in a semblance of a smile. "Over. Child, it has just begun. Once I have merged with this heart, I will be the world. Every thought, every life, every breath, will be subject to my will. And my will, is silence." He didn't attack physically. He attacked Ash's mind. A wave of pure despair washed over Ash, 100 times stronger than the illusions in the trial. He was suddenly back in Pallet Town, a 10-year-old boy, watching Gary Oak leave with a crowd of adoring fans while he was left with a disobedient Pikachu. The sting of being second best, of being left behind. He was in Sinnoh, watching a triumphant Paul walk off the field after their devastating loss at Lake Acuity. The crushing weight of a superior rival. He was in Kalos, the taste of ashes in his mouth after his narrow, heartbreaking defeat in the league finals. The agony of being so close to his dream, only to have it snatched away. Every failure, every doubt, every moment of weakness in his entire life, Kalen dredged it up and threw it at him. "You have always failed when it mattered most," Kalen's voice whispered in his soul. "You are a collection of near misses and second-place finishes. What makes you think this time will be any different? You are not a champion. You are a fraud." The psychic assault was overwhelming. Ash stumbled, clutching his head, the ghosts of his past threatening to drown him. Pikachu shrieked, feeling his partner's agony. But then, through the storm of failure, another memory surfaced. A quiet moment on a moonlit beach. Lillie's arms around him. Her voice, "We are stronger together, Ash. That's your real power." He remembered her smile, the feeling of her hand in his. He remembered Kukui's proud roar, Burnet's warm hug, his mother's unwavering love. He remembered every friend he had ever made, every Pokémon who had ever trusted him. They were not memories of failure. They were memories of love. Of connection. "You're wrong," Ash grunted, forcing himself to his knees, then to his feet. He looked up at Kalen, his eyes blazing with a light that had nothing to do with any legendary blessing. It was his own, indomitable spirit. "My failures don't define me. They taught me. My losses made me stronger. But my bonds make me who I am. And that's something you can never take from me." He let out a roar, a pure, primal cry of defiance, and unleashed his own aura. It erupted from him not as a weapon, but as a shield, a brilliant, golden flare of pure life and emotion that burned away Kalen's psychic venom. Kalen recoiled, his shadowy form hissing as if struck by a physical blow. Emotion is a flaw. A chaotic variable, no. Ash yelled back. It's our greatest strength. The duel was set. The clash of ideologies, given form. It was time to end it. Ash threw his arm forward, his Zeering blazing to life. But this time, he didn't just draw on the Electrium Z. He drew on everything. On the light of the sun, on the power of his own aura, on his unbreakable bond with his partner. "Pikachu," he roared. "This is for everyone. For our family. For Alola. For the whole world." Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, landing before him. He was no longer just a Pikachu. He was a miniature sun, a blazing orb of golden energy. The solar power granted by Solgaleo surged. Amplified by Ash's own fully realized aura. Let's show him a light he can never put out. Gigavolt. Havoc. It was not the controlled, multi-hued stream of the 10 million volt thunderbolt. It was a raw, untamed tsunami of pure, golden solar fire and life energy. It was the sun itself, brought down to earth, a cleansing flame of pure, unadulterated emotion. The attack slammed into Kalen and the corrupted heart crystal. Kalen screamed, a real, physical scream of agony and disbelief, as the light washed over him. The void energy, the antithesis of life, could not withstand such a pure, concentrated dose of it. The attack wasn't destroying him. It was purifying him. It was burning away the silence, the cold, the nothingness, and reminding his very atoms of what it meant to be alive, to feel. The shadowy form of the Umbra Animus was violently ripped from his being, a screeching, formless entity of pure black that was instantly banished by the combined, now purified light of the tree, Solgaleo, and Lunala, which lanced across dimensions to seal the wound for good. The black and violet veins on the heart crystal vanished, replaced by the pure, healthy glow of life. The light from Ash's attack faded, leaving a man slumped at the base of the crystal. Just a man. Powerless, trembling, his eyes wide with the shocking, painful return of a full spectrum of feeling. Kalen, the would-be god, was weeping. The battle was over. Epilogue: months later, peace had returned. It was a deep, thankful peace, the kind that can only be truly appreciated after a great storm. A powerless and broken Kalen was in the custody of the International Ranger Union, undergoing psychological rehabilitation. The world's top scientists, led by a newly allied Kores, were studying his technology not for war, but to understand the fundamental nature of life force. The purified energy that had surged from the revitalized tree of beginning had washed over the world like a gentle wave. Its first and most profound effect was in a quiet medical bay in Alola. One morning, Luzaman and Burnet were running their daily scans when a hand reached out and touched Luzaman's arm. She had turned to see her husband, Moan, looking at her, his eyes no longer vacant, but full of confusion, recognition, and a deep, abiding love. "Luzman," he had whispered. The empty shelves of his mind had been refilled. The Ether family was finally, truly, whole. The final scene is on a tranquil Alolan beach at sunset. The sky is a breathtaking canvas of orange, pink, and gold. Ash and Lillie are walking along the shoreline, hand in hand, the water lapping gently at their bare feet. Ash is no longer wearing his champion's mantle like a weight, but like a comfortable, familiar jacket. He has grown into the role, becoming a leader who commands respect not through dominance, but through empathy and a quiet, unshakable strength. Lillie is the newly appointed head of the Ether Foundation's Global Conservation Initiative, her work with Snowy to heal the corrupted Pokémon having paved the way for a whole new field of spiritual Pokémon medicine. She is a respected scientist, a leader in her own right, her compassion matched only by her intellect. They stop walking and just stand for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "It's beautiful," Lillie says softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Yeah," Ash agrees, his arm wrapping around her. "It is." There is no grand proposal, no dramatic declaration. They don't need one. Their commitment is as deep and as natural as the tide. "Glad Ion is taking my father on a tour of the regions he missed," Lillie says with a small smile. "He says Dad is fascinated by Galarian curry." Ash chuckles. "I bet my mom is trying to get the recipe." They talk of the future, not as an unknown, but as a shared project they are building together. Of expanding the conservation area. Of establishing a training school for young battlers on Melee. Of building a house of their own, right here on this stretch of beach. Of a life. The perspective pulls back, away from the two figures on the shore, and up towards the lanai of Kukui's house. Kukui and Burnet are there, watching them, their arms around each other. Moan and Luzman are beside them, holding hands, their faces content. And next to them, holding a fresh glass of iced tea, is Delia Ketchum, visiting for the season. She watches her son, not with the sad pride of seeing him leave, but with the quiet joy of seeing him home. They are a complete and happy, if unconventional, family. Ash looks out at the endless ocean, the same ocean that had once represented an infinite, unknown road. Now, it is just the view from his backyard. He looks at Lillie, her face illuminated by the last light of the day, and a feeling of profound peace settles over him. He is Ash Ketchum, champion of Alola. Protector of the light. And he is, finally and truly, home. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.